like to remind everybody that the meeting is being broadcast via the internet, so prepare accordingly. Before we get into the agenda this morning or this afternoon, I would like to welcome two new board members, Ms. Dora Alcala. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Jerry Cordy. And Jerry's actually been to, I guess, a couple of committee meetings already, but Jerry, welcome, and love to give either one of you the opportunity if you'd like to say a few words.
Well,
you have to push your little button.
Oh, yeah, little red button.
got it. Okay, well, first of all, what a wonderful opportunity to be here, to be part of what I consider is so important in the education of our students with our great state of Texas. I think it's a good time to come to the board when we're, closing the gaps and start opening new ones and trying to be part of it. So I'm very excited and very fortunate. It all happened very fast. I get a call, Governor Perry would like to know if you would like to serve. And I said, well, first of all, I want to know where I can serve. And when they said the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, I said, absolutely. So here I am. And I hope that I know it is going to be a wonderful experience and a great ride. So it's a pleasure to be with all of you and a wonderful staff also.
Thank you very much. Jerry, any comments?
I just want to say thank you, and I look forward to helping to serve the great state of Texas, especially the students.
Great. Thanks, Jerry. Item number 2 is approval of the minutes. The meeting minutes were sent out on May 12th, 2014. I'm sorry, the meeting minutes of the April 23rd, 2014 Agency Operations Committee and the May 12th, 2014 special called Agency Operations Committee meeting. These meeting minutes were sent out on July 2nd, 2014 to everybody. Do I have any questions or corrections to the minutes? If not, may I have a motion? Bobby, I have a motion. I have a second. John, you're my other board member, so you've been through this before. So, John, you guys just decide how you want to break up the workload today. But thank you, John. We have a second. Any questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. For the next agenda item, we have 3 updates that will be presented. The updates are information only, do not require any committee action. Agenda item 3A is a standing report that we receive every quarter, which is an update on the agency's finances. This report is sent to all board members approximately 2 weeks ago. Ken Martin, Interim Assistant Commissioner for Financial Services, will present this report, and he and the staff will be available to respond to any questions after that. Mr. Martin, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. This report was developed approximately 2009 in collaboration and with request of the board. This report has been modified and enhanced over time to help benefit the board and is provided on a quarterly basis on these meetings here. In the event of time or lack of enough time, I'm going to just walk through each section at a high level. If you have questions, please feel free to ask me. And then also at the end, I'd like to just solicit your input on and feedback on any changes or suggested revisions, and as well as in the future, if you have any, you certainly can contact Dr. Alonzo or the commissioner, et cetera, and we'll be able to make those changes for you. If I can turn your attention to page 1. This is basically a snapshot of our agency's operating budget. We have 2 sections of which our budget comes into play. One is what we call the A strategy or A goal. That is all our direct expenses that we have. And then we have our I goal, that's the indirect. The direct expenditures are most of our program teams and their costs within there. And then the indirect is all the support staff from the commissioner to myself and our teams on down, internal audit, HR, et cetera. So we have that delineation broken out. What we try to do here is we break it out into each individual colored section, and then also we walk through the original budget, and you'll see original budget used frequently throughout this report. The original budget is the budget that we had presented in April for the agency operating budget. That was approved by the board. That's what we'll call our baseline. And then from there, as we make revisions throughout the year, we will show it as an adjustment to the budget. And I'll discuss some of the adjustments in more detail on another page. But it allows you to see what was the original budget that was approved by the board, and also, for transparency, revisions that we've made throughout the year as we've progressed. And then you have the total budget. So this is just a budget snapshot, what we started with, as well as revisions within there. If I can turn your attention to page 3, or page 2, excuse me. Several of these pages together, I'm not going to go into detail unless you had specific questions, but these couple pages here, these are all the revisions that we've made, quote, adjustments to our budget that would show up on those other pages. And we break them down in a lot of detail. I'm not necessarily sure if this detail is necessary. Sir?
Mr. Martin, a question. Is what we're looking at available to people sitting out in the audience?
It is available. We distribute it to the executive staff on a monthly basis. We do not publicly post this out to our
Just a suggestion that maybe next time you make the presentation, if you could, get it up on the screens so somebody here could follow along that's in the audience.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
On the page with the budget adjustments, again, these go down to our strategy level, and as defined within our General Appropriations Act. Within there, we have the detail of each adjustment made, and there's several pages with these adjustments. Again, I don't expect to go through the detail, but if you did have specific questions, I'm happy to answer them. If I can turn your attention over to page 7, this is our overall operating and trustee budget. So we break out our budget into operating, which you saw on the very first page, and then we have what we call trustee. These are the funds that are actually the program funds that we sent, the grants, the services that are performed, et cetera, in support of the programs that we have. Again, you'll see original budget in the first column, the budget adjustments we've made throughout the year, and then the adjusted budget. The fourth column is our fiscal year-to-date expenses. So these are what we have expended year-to-date at this point in time. Now, with that said, the following column is our encumbrances. We encumber funds when we initiate a contract. So if we obligate $2 million for a year or a 2-year period, we may expend $1 million up to this point, and we may have another $1 million that we'll expend over time. We'll have $1 million in the expense column. We'll have $1 million in the encumbrance column for the $2 million, that particular $2 million contract. And then we have the total fiscal year to date, adding those two numbers together so that you can see what we've expended and obligated in total. And then we have the following column, which is a comparison to the budget and how much is still available within the budget itself. And the following page is just a continuation within those, and we group these again by our General Appropriations Act, the goals as they're laid out, so this ties out to the format for that. At the very bottom, you'll note on the page 8, we also include community colleges. So community colleges are actually appropriated to us in a separate portion of Article 3, and it's Agency 704, we're Agency 781. But we've also included these in here just to make sure, so again, for transparency and reporting purposes, to include the community colleges for that purpose. If I can turn your attention to the next page, it gets into our federal programs. So these we broke out on a separate report because there's a nuance with federal programs that the funding doesn't follow a state fiscal year, it follows a federal fiscal year. And the federal fiscal year being different than the state, plus it can live a little longer and doesn't necessarily follow the same appropriation requirements as general revenue. So with that said, we have the federal programs listed here, and this is similar, but you may see within certain programs multiple federal fiscal years open, so we can have one award for 13, federal fiscal year 13, as well as a subsequent award for federal fiscal year 14. So you may see two line items for the same program, whereas on the state side, you do not. From that standpoint, we have the award dates, the award amount, very similar. We're using different terminology, but similar, from award amount being your budget, your expenditures, and your obligated. And then we have our unobligated balance or available budget, as you saw in the prior pages. And then to the far, how much revenue we've drawn down. So we manage our federal programs on a reimbursement basis. So when we receive a request for an expenditure, we go to the feds, we draw down the funding, and then we pay that expenditure to the institution or entity that made that. So what you want to see on the right hand, on the cash column, is a negative balance. We're not running in a deficit, but it just means that we have expenditures that are pending that we have not drawn down the revenue for yet, and that's on a constant basis. We have those on an ongoing. What we don't want to see is that we've overdrawn money and not enough expenditures to match that. We'd be on the other direction. And then second to last, I'll walk through. So the agency, as you know, and we'll talk a little more on an agenda item, we have our loan program, we have our debt that supports the loan program. And this page is meant to be a summary of some of the information relating to the debt and loan program itself. The top section is what we call our cash view. You have the beginning balance at the beginning of the year, various different sections. The interest and sinking fund is our debt service fund. That is the money we use. We build through loan repayments, and we use to pay our debt over time. The student loan auxiliary fund is actually the loan fund. So those are the funds that we issue to students. We use to issue new loans. And same with the Texas Opportunity Plan Fund. And then the Be On Time Fund is a loan type fund, but it comes from a separate source, either tuition set-asides or GR. It's not supported by the bond program. And the revenue bond fund is about a 1991. We went out with some revenue bonds. That's why the number's so low. It was a one-time event, and it's been depleting since, but we've kept it on here for those purposes. And then the changes are just that. They're the net changes of each one of those line items that's occurred throughout the year. So interest and sinking fund, you could see it increasing due to repayments being received, but it'll also decrease on a net basis if we had debt service payments that we've made. So that is the net of those two amounts combined in each one of those line items. Same with the student loan auxiliary. We had new bond issuance this year, so it went up, but then we've also issued loans out of that fund, so it's decreased over time. And then the ending balance is there. And below is just a snapshot of our debt summary. So you can see our total debt and principal, interest, and then our total, where we stand at this point in time. The last page to walk through is our loan receivables. So basically we go into detail about loan disbursements, repayments. This was based to be a snapshot of our loan program. Since our loan program is not directly called out in our General Appropriations Act in detail, in line item detail, we developed this report in collaboration with the board for that purpose, to be able to show information related to the loan program. And unless you would like, I'm not really going to walk through every single line item on here, but principal, interest, I think some of those are fairly intuitive. And then on the bottom section, I will note that basically where you see the loan principal aging right in the middle and then the bottom box, we have different loan types. So what we call CAL, TFT, HEAL, and HELP loans. Most of our new loans are the CAL loans. Federal loans was from our federal program. We no longer issue federal loans, but we do still have receivable balances that are still remaining. And we have our Be On Time program, which we've discussed earlier. We also have loans that are in judgment, and there's certain loans that hit certain criteria that go into our judgment phase. And we have our Texas Armed Services Scholarship Program. That's recently, about 3 years, that it was initiated, and a new program there. And then we have our total balances off to the far right, and a couple statistics down in the bottom regarding default rate according to LBB metrics, and some judgment amounts again down there. Does anybody have any specific questions or any specific comments where this report could be more meaningful for you? And if you don't have any now, again, we're certainly open and welcome any feedback in the future on this.
Okay. Any questions? Janelle?
Just, it would be nice to have it ahead of time, before the meeting. Well, did it come out to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
And I just missed
it was mailed about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay. I missed it. I didn't see it.
It was with all the other material.
Yeah, I think it came with the attachments in the
It's
agenda.
all in email jail. Okay.
That was correct.
So, and just a question about all the adjustments. So the process now for making budget adjustments, is there a clear way that we're doing that now, and that goes through an approval? You want to just talk to us a little bit about that?
I can, or I can wait for Dr. Alonso on his Be On Time. He had a report to.
There will be, there's a report coming up, that was one of the recommendations of the Be On Time. I'll be glad to, but we can cover it now if you want to. I mean,
To answer your question at a
They're
very
more
high
than
level,
just
yes.
the Be On Time
Right.
adjustments, so,
But the process that we developed was across all,
Okay.
but it was related to the Be On Time audit. But to answer your question, yes, there's a much more robust process and reviews that will occur that have been revised, and Dr. Alonso can go in detail.
John?
Mr. Martin, this is a lot of information. Is there anything that you would point to that is of concern to you particularly?
Nothing that's a concern. We're in the middle of our biennium. If this was maybe towards the end of the biennium, what I look for personally is how much available funding we have. A lot of times we do not have UB authority, so we either need to get contracts, obligate the funding to cover and preserve those funds. For this particular year, almost every program has UB authority. The money can move from this AY14 to AY15. So nothing at this point that concerns me. Our loan program is doing well. We'll talk about a couple of items on the loan program that's on the agenda, but nothing straight out that I see.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Ken, thank you very much. Agenda item 3B is the discussion on Board Rule 1.16, Contracts and Materials and Services. Dr. Alonso and Bill Franz will present this item. Gentlemen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rule 1.16, as you can see on the material that we sent out and handed out, is the rule that the board adopted in 2006, I believe, to govern the issuing of contracts for materials and services. It has been amended several times since then. It is what we have used to get approval for contracts, how to initiate a contract, and so forth. Several months ago, a couple of months ago, there was a question raised whether this processes and procedures and the rule is still working. Is this the best optimal use of a way to address contracts and so forth? That, coupled with the fact that we have new board members, the chairman asked us to present this and go over the highlights and then get input. We can't change it today, but get any input, any suggestions that you may want us to go back and initiate an amendment or amendments which will have to be posted through the regular rulemaking process. So let me just quickly, I tried to put the major points on the what we call the blue page. In this case, it's beige, I guess. Under this rule here, the commissioner is delegated authority to approve any contracts, the commissioner or the deputy commissioner, anything under $100,000. Between $100,000 and $750,000, it has to come to a committee for approval. Over $750,000, it has to go to the entire board. There is a provision in this rule that if a contract that was approved under any of those scenarios that I just mentioned increases up to 10% of the original contract, we have the authority to increase it by 10%, no more than 10% of the original amount. Under delegated authority, the $100,000 that I spoke about earlier, there is a provision in here that we have to bring a report to every board meeting of all contracts issued under that delegated authority. That report looks like this. It was sent out with the materials, and I think it's here on your desk. And so that simply lists the contracts that were issued under delegated authority. The other point that I put on here, and I think that this is where, Ms. Shepherd, you had asked, let's take a look at this, is that there is a provision in this rule that says that once the board or the committee approves the issuance of a solicitation, request for proposals, request for application, RFQ, whatever the solicitation is, once the board, the staff receives those responses, then we take it back to the chair, vice chair of the board, and the chair of the appropriate committee, whether it be CAUS or AOC, for approval of the contract. And again, this is so that we don't have to wait till the next board meeting. But again, we're open to any suggestions. And the last thing that I want to mention on this is that there is a provision on here, it was added through one of the amendments in subsequent years after being adopted, that says that if there are any funds that come to the agency for which the agency has no discretion, for example, the legislature tells us exactly what the formula will be for distributing those funds. It does not have to come before a committee, regardless of the amount. It does not have to come before a committee or the board, or even go through board chair, vice chair approval. So those are the highlights of the rule. We would be glad to entertain any questions or suggestions.
What was that last point again? If the money comes from the legislature with no discretion, the board doesn't have to do anything? Well, what happens to the money?
Well, the board doesn't have to approve the contracting out of those funds or the disbursement of those funds.
It's trustee.
It's trustee to us. Now, the board does approve the funds and the disbursement of those funds when you approve the operating budget. So it's not like, we're not bringing it up to you. It's just that we don't have to go through the process of getting approval to say.
So if there's no discretion for the money, why would they give it to us?
Trustees.
Just.
It's trustee to us.
Okay.
One of the things that Ken mentioned in his report was where he added the community colleges.
Right.
Those go out to the community colleges based on the formula.
Right.
They are trustee to us. We manage that money, and we're still responsible. We're still accountable for it. But this is a provision.
I see that as being discretion.
Well, discretion, when we talk about discretion, we mean when we set out a solicitation and we ask for proposals or applications on who's going to be the best provider of developmental ed or whatever. So that's the distinguishing factor.
Harold?
I think the important thing, and we had some discussion about this at one of the previous meetings, I don't remember which, but for example, when you're chair of cause, and it's not a matter of the chair, the vice chair, and the committee chair approving anything that the board hasn't already seen. It's a matter of if the board approves something at tomorrow's meeting, for example, and we won't meet again until October, but it's ready to go in August, we don't want to have to wait to award that contract until the next board meeting. Time is of the essence in some of these transactions.
But that's not really the question I was asking. I was asking about budget adjustments. And now, if you're just talking about discretionary money that's going out for bids and the contracts are there, that's one thing. But adjusting the budget, putting money in one account versus another account, or adding money to what was budgeted, or that's my question. It's not really the bids and the
Contract
contracting.
awards, yeah.
So.
Rule 1.16 does not address that issue whatsoever. 1.16, the way we've interpreted it over time, is to apply to contracts, including grants, because after all, grants are just another form of contract. And those are the items that are covered by this. The budget adjustments, they're not. Although I understand Dr. Alonso will be addressing budget adjustments and transfers as part of his Be On Time update, my understanding also is that the policy is applicable to all, not just Be On Time.
Right.
Any other questions? John?
So, Dr. Alonso, this Rule 1.16, it was adopted by the board in 2006, and then the materials say it's been amended 7 times since its adoption.
Right.
Why has it been amended so many times?
One that I recall specifically is the board wanted to give us the authority to do that 10% amendment without having to come back to committee or to the board. There was some of those were just simply clean up language, to clean up the language. Early on, I think it had the commissioner or his designee The board wanted to name the designee, not by name, but by title, and that was one of the amendments. So a lot of those were just clean up. There is a provision, and I believe that this came about as an amendment, as I just talked about, the one about no discretion, because I remember the discussion on that. That was one of the amendments. So those are the type of amendments that have occurred throughout the years.
Okay, and I'm new to this, so help me. But if it's under $100,000 and Dr. Paredes is going to approve it, does that require his signature on something?
Either his signature or my signature.
Okay, so he can delegate that to
Yes.
you. All right. And I'm interested generally in this whole area of signatures on contracts.
Yes.
If I pulled a contract out and looked at it, maybe even one of these larger contracts, would it show? Would Dr. Paredes be signing most of these larger contracts?
Some come for his signature, some have my signature.
All right.
But one of us, who are delegated under Rule 116, will sign the actual.
So
contract.
you could actually be the signatory on one of these really big contracts.
Yes.
Without he's not going to be on it. Not necessarily.
Well, I might not. It might be that I'm out of the office and I haven't, and I'm not there to sign the contract at a particular moment. But I'm informed about the contract, and I do say go ahead and sign it for me.
Okay. Well, I've been doing this state government thing a long time, and one thing that I like to see, because sometimes a contract will become controversial, and all of a sudden, like who signed it and who approved it.
Yes.
And what I like to see, and maybe it's just on these larger contracts, and maybe we're doing this, but for example, would your signature appear on there, sort of approved as to legal?
It would either be mine or one of the lawyers working in the Office of General Counsel.
And
It's what we have is a system. It's called the BMS system. It's a management system designed to help the accounting flow, and it should track each contract the agency enters into. And in that system, it will list who initiated the contract, who has approved the contract from the very beginning stage all the way through either the commissioner's signature or the deputy commissioner's signature.
But would the lawyer's signature be on the actual contract?
No, sir. There are a few where lawyers approve as to farm, but not other than that. No, sir.
But it is documented in the BMS system that Bill mentioned that it has gone through. It's an electronic signature, if you will.
It's something that I like to see, which is that on the actual contract, you've got the signatory on behalf of the agency, but then you have, and it can be approved as to form, but some lawyer, either you or one of your lawyers, also signing that contract, and then the CFO, somebody saying approved, from the financial point of view.
And all of that.
This is something that a lot of government agencies do, and frankly, it's just to increase accountability. Yeah, because sometimes, and has nothing to do with the coordinating board, but I have been involved with agencies when a contract becomes controversial, and all of a sudden nobody knows who approved it. Did the lawyer look it over? No, we don't know who looked it over. So it's just something that we might want to think about doing, especially with some of these larger contracts.
Well, one of the things that, and the last stop on this BMS system for contracts, whether it's $100,000 or less or one that has gone to the board, is my office. And that's one of the things that I look for, to make sure that it has gone through one of the lawyers, and it has been reviewed, and it is. It does have the electronic. Granted, it does not have the manual signature on the contract, but there is assurance that it has been reviewed by the lawyers, and I look for that.
I might ask Ms. Acala. Now, you were the mayor of Del Rio, correct? Did you all have any kind of a policy like that? I know some. I know where I'm from in Bexar County, I know that all the county contracts are set up like that. At least the more important ones and the ones for the larger dollar amounts, where there are actual signatures on the contract.
Yes, to answer your question, and there were some instances where we did have some controversial contracts, especially in municipalities. You know, you get a lot of contracts, and for all practical purposes, every item and every contract that's approved by the council, the mayor's signature, along with legal, must be on that document. And if the mayor was not available, the mayor pro tem was authorized. But if you looked at all those contracts, that was very important for documentation purposes.
I mean, I'm sure they do it at Bexar County because I've dealt with that, and I think they do it with the city of San Antonio, but it's something you'll see with a lot of the...
So I get to deal with the federal government a lot, and a lot of controversial contracts where you can break the law, but there should be a standard term sheet that covers each contract. So on the standardized sheet that says over this amount of money, these people have to sign, and there is a place for legal to sign. There's a summary of what the contract actually is about, so you don't have to read the 25 pages in the contract. And a standard term sheet will actually give you a quick way to actually categorize and keep your contracts really up to date with all the expiration dates on them. But most people who deal with the federal government now and don't want to be audited do that sort of thing with a term sheet that has everybody's designated signatures, and it doesn't go forward till the right amount of signatures are on there. And they're not necessarily on the contract. The person who needs to sign the contract does that, but everybody else says, look, the accountability is here, it's gone through the system, and BMS may already actually do that.
Actually, it does, but it's not a manual signature. Mm-hmm. The way the system works is there's lots of documents within the system.
I'm sure.
And even if you're just looking at one contract, the contract itself will be there. Any notes people have written pertaining to that contract is another tab. The approvals are all set out so that you can actually see who has approved it. And if, for example, the contract came to me and I did not approve it, it cannot go farther in the BMS system without my approval. So it's got the same type of safeguards that I understand you're mentioning, Mr. Steen, built in, but you don't see them on the last page, the signature page of the contract.
So it's a standardized routing system is what you're saying.
It is.
And if I needed to go back and track, I could track it through that system.
Absolutely. To use Dr. Gardner's office as an example, let us say that the P16 division initiated a contract for X. What you would see there is in the system some individual in P16 initiating it. You would then see Judy Laredo as the assistant commissioner for that division approving it. It won't go any farther if she doesn't approve it. Then you would see it circulating through to contract management. From contract management, it will flow to legal. From legal, it would flow to Dr. Gardner and Dr. Alonzo for their approvals as well. And if any one person in that system does not approve, the contract stops.
Bill,
Yes, sir.
Is this the BMS? Is that right? BS?
Yes, sir.
Is that a state system or is it
No, it's
private
one
software or what?
proprietary software that the coordinating board, Office of Business Services, purchased 4 or 5 years ago.
About 5 years ago.
Ken?
Correct. It's a software for service that we purchase for this specific purpose. My team administers the software. As Bill explained accurately, it has a routing process. Any one of those individuals within the routing process can also return that. If they had more questions, information, basically they could return it back to the originator for that purpose.
So, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Just quickly, so do other agencies use this one, or do they use others that are similar to it? Is this like the leading one that's available, or
I doubt that.
Any idea?
I'm not going to say it's the leading one. Some agencies still handle contracts, to my knowledge, by just passing the contracts hard copy around. We did that until we got this system. And at that point, you would actually have signatures on the cover sheet of the contract. You did not have them on the signature page. I have not found many state agencies where the lawyers actually sign the contract in addition to the managerial employee signing the contract. However, some agencies still use that system. Others have systems that are at least akin to this.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I don't know that any other agency has this particular system. I'm not saying they don't. I'm just not aware of it.
Well, it still seems like it provides a lot of the controls. I mean, it sounds to me that when things can't go to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, that it seems like you've just automated the process. And it feels to me, just in the sky, this has been very helpful actually, because it does kind of clear up some things. It seems like it accomplishes a lot of what I would think would take care of any concerns.
It's designed to.
Yeah,
it also has a note writing capability. So if Bill or his team goes in and takes a look, they could put some notes on just comments for anybody to reference as it continues on with the chain, et cetera, that typically you wouldn't be writing on a contract or something.
So is it considered an electronic signature, a certified electronic signature you're putting on it?
No, ma'am. It is not.
Can that routing process be output, like a top sheet? Would it be possible to say all the summaries, we're going to output them as a printed document and put them on a top sheet to the contract?
And print it? Like print it? Yes. In fact, when contracts come to me for approval, and this was I initiated this when we were handling the ARA funds, if you recall, the federal funds that were placed on us in 2009. Where we were issuing grants awards by the hundreds every day. They were going through the routing process in the BMS system, but when they were presented to me for signature, I requested that they print that top sheet to see that it had gone through the whole thing. So we still have that capability, and those that do require signature, I insist that it comes with that. So it does have that capability.
Well, it seems like it might answer John's concern is if there was a top sheet or something that went with the contract, so you could just flip down and you could see all your approvals rather than having to go back to the software and reference them. It might be.
Unless you print out the contract, though, you're looking at the contract electronically.
Okay.
And the approvals are right there as well. So, I mean, you can see who has approved. You can see where it's at in the process and who has approved, and take a look at the contract essentially simultaneously.
So, Mr. Chairman, so Bill, are you satisfied at this point that it's a good system, one that is effective? That
it is effective. I'm sure there could be smoother systems. We have gotten most of the glitches out of the system over time, and I think it operates pretty smoothly now. But I'm not going to, because I'm not familiar with other systems, I'm not aware exactly of what else is available.
okay.
So we asked to bring this forward as a report only. Would committee members like to see either additional information brought forward? Would you like to see some kind of an action item brought that we can really talk in detail? Or are we satisfied with the report? Satisfied? John?
I'll say this again. If you have a controversial contract, there's nothing like you don't have to refer to another source when you can look at the actual contract and see who approved it for the agency, and that it was approved by the legal department and approved from by the financial people, and those signatures are actually on the contract. Talk about accountability. That's the strongest way to do it. And of course, I'm new to all this. It looks like there are a whole lot of contracts, and I don't know if that's an issue. And of course, they are tiered. Maybe you'd look at it with just the larger contracts, but that's the strongest way to do it. And another thing that we might do is I don't know if we've had any auditor input on this, just to sort of see what's out there. Yeah.
We just happen to have our auditor here today.
Nothing like being put on the spot.
I even have my little.
There you go.
Where are your
name tags?
She's prepared.
And Susan, by the way, does audits on other agencies. She may be able to better answer that question than I can.
Susan, welcome.
Thank you. I'm sorry, which question would you like me to answer?
We're just talking about, were you working on something else back there?
No, there was multiple questions. That's why I was like, is there a particular one? Because I know you were mentioning about the top sheets and signing and...
Well, no, what I was looking at, I don't know whether they still do this at the TABC, but we implemented it while I was there. Just the accountability on contracts, especially the larger, more important contracts, where you actually have the designated signatory, but on the signature page of the contract itself, it shows approved as to legal form. I guess that's what it would be, Mr. France, and where the lawyer is signing it, and then to have accountability, to have somebody, the CFO or somebody equivalent to that, also signing. So you've got those three signatures on the contract.
Generally speaking, yes, you do see that. It's usually at the state agencies that we work at, it's still paper. As Bill was mentioning, they are actually physically pushing a contract with a cover sheet from desk to desk to desk. And they are in the process of trying to streamline that, especially like HHSC Enterprise. It's just in the process
Ms.
of
Warren, just to be
consolidating.
clear, I'm not talking about a cover sheet. I'm talking about a
contract. But what
I'm
they
talking
do,
about, in other words, you look at the last page of the contract where the signatures are, and you see those signatures there.
you do, but to get to that page, the way it works is there is a cover sheet to start with that at least 4 or 5 people sign off before it gets to those 3 people on the back. Sometimes legal is on the cover sheet. Sometimes legal is on the actual document. It depends on the agency. And it also depends upon the level of hierarchy, as you were mentioning, the type of contract as well as the dollar value. There are some contracts that legal does literally sign the contract along with the commissioner. And those threshold contracts cannot be signed by anybody but those 2 people. But it's all based on a policy of thresholds of tolerance. And not just dollars. Some of the agencies drive it by the type of contract. So like if you're going out to like an IBM or a TMHP outsourcing type thing, regardless of the dollar amount, those require high-level signatures on them when you're trying to hire a service provider. Whereas if you're just going to a medical doctor or you're going to a foster care home or something like that, it doesn't necessarily have to have a commissioner. It can be delegated to an associate commissioner who oversees foster care. So a lot of it's driven by the policies, but there are generally at least 2, if not 3, signatures on the physical contract, yes.
So would you feel comfortable if we asked the staff to go back and look at this and bring it forward to us at a future meeting?
Well, I think it's a very worthwhile thing to look into, and we don't want to unnecessarily burden people, but as I said, that's one of the things that we want to do is to think about accountability, and that's the way to do it. I'm a lawyer. Somebody asked me to put my signature on the contract. Just human nature. You're going to look at it pretty darn closely.
Sure. Okay. Just great feedback. Thank you.
We'd be pleased to take another look at that, and with your all's permission, I'm going to contact a couple other agencies that Susan just mentioned and find out just how it is they're doing it. If it's pushing the old paper contracts through,
it's paper contracts.
I'm very familiar with that system.
It is paper contracts. None of those have been automated yet. They were on the drawing board to do that. And to my knowledge, I'm not aware of anybody who uses BMS either. So to answer that other question. We
Okay.
do look at BMS here, but not at the other agencies. Most of it is paper, and it's files, literally. You have to go sit in the procurement room, pull it off the shelf. It's a box, RFP, all the documents. It's all paper.
Okay. Thanks to all of you very much. Next item, agenda item 3C, is an update on the Be On Time audit report. Dr. Alonso will present this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We placed a copy of this status update or progress report, I think is what we title, at your places right before the meeting started. It is a document that has some red writing on the top of the page, and then I'm going to walk through that with you. So that red writing, the reason I put that is so that right up front you can see that it deviates a little bit from the audit report. The audit report, if you recall, came up with 6 recommendations, 6 findings, 6 recommendations. However, within, and of course the management responds to each one of those recommendations. However, some of those recommendations had more than one action item. So for the ease of tracking and making sure that we are doing what we're supposed to do and what we said we would do, I broke out those 6 recommendations into 11 action items, and I will report on each one of those. The first one, action item, had to do with the commissioner tasking the general counsel to develop and implement a policy on obtaining legal opinion on transfers or any item that staff feels that legal needs to look at. That has been implemented. It has been developed, it was discussed, and it has been implemented. It has been distributed agency-wide, and so all staff now have that policy that Mr. France developed. Item 1B, again still tied to that first recommendation, is where the auditor recommended that we seek LBB approval to refund the funds that were spent, the general revenue funds that were spent on the independent schools. We have done that. We met with the LBB staff, and then we have, subsequent to that, also submitted a letter. So it is in their hands, and so that one is implemented. 1C has to do with asking the LBB if we have to restore funds to the state treasury that they deem that should have been lapsed at the end of FY13 biennium. We have also implemented that. We talked to them, and we've also submitted a letter asking them for a formal ruling on that. It is awaiting their response, as I note there under item 1C. It's pending. Recommendation 2 asks us to look at the configuration of the Assistant Commissioner for Business Services and consider redistributing those duties. We have done that. In fact, our 2 assistant commissioners, interim assistant commissioners, are now functioning. One for financial services, interim assistant commissioner Ken Martin for financial services, and Lisa Muller, who is acting or functioning as interim assistant commissioner for student financial aid. The job descriptions have been split up. They have been vetted, reviewed, and they are now awaiting formal reorganization of the agency to post and to so I'll mark that one partially implemented, even though we've made quite a bit of progress. It's now just a matter of getting those out there and going through our HR office. Item number 3 asks us to look at strengthening the risk definition, risk management, and communication. I mark that one as partially implemented because while we have taken steps to ensure that there is communication between the assistant commissioners and the deputy commissioner for finance and administration, there's still some work to be done, and this one I simply have not gotten to the rest of it. There's some risk awareness training that we need to implement, look at some best practices, and look at increasing the risk awareness of staff. So for that reason, I marked that one as partially implemented. Recommendation number 4 asked us to look at the HELMS system. The HELMS is our higher ed loan management system that will allow us to disperse the batches and segregate them on a daily basis, on a transactional basis. I am pleased to report that has been completed. In fact, on our management response to that item, we said that we would complete that by mid-July and have that ready to go for the lending season that's coming up. And I'm very pleased to say that we did that ahead of time. It was actually implemented on June 27th, and it is functioning as it's supposed to be. The reason I marked that as partially implemented is because we also said that those loans that were disbursed prior to that fix would have to be manually reassigned to the proper funding source. And out of 3,538 loans, we still have about 60 more to go. So we have manually transferred about 99.4% of the loans that were made prior to that. Staff informs me that will be completed within the next week or so. So as tempted as I was to say that is implemented, full disclosure, I think, requires me to put that as partially implemented. But we're almost there. On the next update, you will have that as fully implemented. Recommendation number 5 is strengthening the guidelines that address the steps in funding, especially in financial aid programs, the volatility of the Be On Time funds. And so we have implemented that action item 5A, which is put the disbursement, not the disbursement, the allocation of Be On Time funds through the negotiated rulemaking process. That was finalized and approved by the board in January 2004. This is the allocation for private institutions, which is the general revenue. And in addition to doing that, and that memorializes the steps in rule, and not only in rule, but rules that were adopted by the negotiated rulemaking committee. In addition to that, we have strengthened the reviews, the internal reviews of all allocations, of all formulas, spreadsheets, data, and so forth, the methodology. Lisa has set up a team within her division that takes a look at what we are proposing before it even comes up to my office and to the Commissioner's office. So we mark that one as implemented. 5B, we also promised, or we pledged, that we would initiate the rulemaking process for the tuition set-aside, which is what is used to make loans, Be On Time loans to students in the public institutions. That one we mark as partially implemented because while we have started that process, the committee has not met. It is scheduled to meet in a couple of weeks, on August the 4th, I believe it is. We've selected the committee, we've posted the agenda. Linda and her team have done everything that needs to be done. We just need to get them together and hopefully come up with a negotiated rule consensus on that very soon. Again, the next update, we hope, we're pretty confident that will be changed over to implemented. Action item 5C, again, ask us to look at how do we ensure that we're tracking those funds and make sure that crossover does not occur again, and that we make sure that the allocation process and documentation and the record retention is working. We have implemented that. We've got, among other things, a cash report, a weekly cash report that has been developed for Be On Time. That goes out to the division heads and the program staff every week, that tracks the cash on real time. So we can tell if we were getting close to exhausting that particular fund and if take corrective actions before it gets to the point of violating what those funds were for. Action item 5D, excuse me. I'm sorry, I heard somebody. Ask us to look at verifying that all institutions are submitting their set-asides that they collect through their tuition, through their processes. We have marked that as partially implemented, not because it's not ready to go, but because we said that this will happen at the end of the fiscal year. The process is completed, but we mark it as partially implemented because the first test will be at the end of FY14. So the financial team working with the Office of General Counsel have identified all the schools that are supposed to be remitting funds. We will check it against our deposit accounts from USAS, which is the state accounting system, and we'll be able to tell if somebody is not submitting and get back to them and find out why are they not submitting their set-asides. So again, at the end of FY14, the next time you get a report on this, that one will move up to fully implemented. And the last one is the one that you were asking about, Ms. Shepard, which asks us to look at improving and expanding the policy on budget transfers. Again, I'm happy to report that that one is fully implemented. We develop strengthened processes. We develop a new sign-off sheet, a review sheet that requires the signature not only of the division asking to transfer funds, but also the General Counsel office, Counsel's office, the Associate Commissioner, of course the Deputy Commissioners, and including the Commissioner. So we feel that we now have the process in place to assure that, along with the interpreting legal questions that I talked about in the first recommendation, gets us there. And so that one I can say is implemented, and it is working. We have posted that and communicated that to all staff. So in summary, out of the 11 items, not findings, but of the 11 action items, 6 of those are fully implemented, 5 are partially, and we're almost there on most of those 5. So I would say it is good progress and we're moving along. I'd be glad to answer any questions on this report.
Any questions?
Go ahead.
I wanted to know, Mark, have you reviewed these?
Very good question.
Mr. Hahn, I've definitely been involved in the keeping informed as far as the changes to the processes, the development of new checklists and forms. So I have looked at that. It looks like a thoughtful approach to addressing these issues. Actually, if I were going to call attention to any aspect of this, it's disclosed in here, but I would just want the board to understand, excuse me, that on the 2 issues that involve the significant dollars, the agency has taken action to ask for feedback regarding the restoration of those funds, but that is still pending a determination, and just want to make sure that that's understood.
Right, and do we have any idea, it says pending, are we given any time frame as to what we should expect?
Not to my knowledge. Commissioner or others may have a perspective.
I should say it in response to your question, we have gone over these recommendations a number of times and spoke at length about whether these recommendations should be categorized as being fully implemented or partially implemented. I was involved in every step of the process, had very thorough conversations with Arturo and others, and I've asked for Mark's input on several occasions. So I think we've done a good job in making sure that the information that we're presenting to the board is as accurate as it can possibly be.
John?
So you've read what we're looking at, this progress report? Is that what you have?
Absolutely.
In front of you?
I was involved in the discussions as far as how to characterize this information. I guess the thing that I have not looked at is I have not gone in and actually tested any of the new processes that have been developed, and really that's difficult until we get a little bit of water under the bridge, and there's some transactions to look at and so forth. But I have been very involved in the development and the vetting of these process changes.
And what's your assessment of this?
I think the agency has made great progress.
Well, I want to say I wanted to compliment Dr. Alonzo. I think this is a really good report, and I like the format. And you summed it up at the end. There are 11 action items that are related to these auditor recommendations, and 6 are implemented, and 5 are partially implemented. And just the big picture: when will we be at a point where we can say all 11 are implemented?
Well, the first 2, of course, are the second and third action items, as has been noted here, really out of our hands. I mean, I wish I could tell you that by next month, or it's pending the LBB. So, but as far as the ones where we have something to do, I would say we should have everything done next 3 or 4 months.
For the board's information, we have met twice with Ursula Parks, the director of LBB, to talk about these issues, to make certain that she fully understood what we were saying, what we were proposing. And I think Linda and I, we met with her how long ago the last time? About 2 weeks ago? About 2 weeks ago. So we've been aggressive to the point of being pushy about trying to get responses to these issues that are still unresolved.
But isn't the significance of that the universities don't know whether they have the money for this fall?
And we've made that point. We made that point.
Yeah, significant issue.
And the LBB is coordinating with the comptroller's office. Do we know if the comptroller is? They're coordinating it, so we don't know.
And just one other question to help me. Were these recommendations internal from you, Mark, or where did the structure of the recommendations? These were
they came directly verbatim from the audit report. Yes.
That's the reason I asked him.
Yeah.
Smart man.
And in regard to Mr. Steen's point about this document being thorough, we spent a good deal of time talking about how to categorize and whether something should be called an item or an issue, or how you subdivide these into different specific problems. So,
I'll say it again. This is very well done.
Thank you, sir.
So, quick comment. One, hopefully everybody realizes we passed over it quickly, but the work that's been done on the front end changes to Helms is significant. It needed to be done, and I appreciate the fact that everyone got on that. That is a significant item. And I think the other 2 on here that are significant obviously are out of our hands, but they're not minor. We need to stay on LAR. We need to get this wrapped up. My request, even if no change, if we would keep this as a report at each meeting until we can say we're done, I would really appreciate that. Even if the report is there is no change, I think we need to stay informed. So, thank you. Thanks, Mark. Agenda item 4 is public testimony on agenda items related to the Committee on Agency Operations. We have 2 people signed up for public testimony today. I'd like to call Dr. Jude Valdez and Dr. Victor Sines of the Texas Association of Chicanos in Higher Education to come forward. They will be providing members with a handout regarding the Doctoral Loan Incentive Repayment Program. And first, welcome. And second, we would ask that you limit your testimony to 3 minutes each. And Dr. Valdez, I think you're up first.
Good afternoon. My name again is Jude Valdez.
That's the mic.
Jude Valdez.
Thank you.
Okay, great. And I'm representing the Texas Association of Chicanos in Higher Education. I also work at the University of Texas San Antonio. I'm here to speak on behalf of, or in support of the Doctoral Incentive Loan Repayment Program, which is a line item in the Coordinating Board's proposed LAR, or Legislative Appropriation Request. The purpose of this program is to provide loan repayment assistance as an incentive to attract members of underrepresented groups as faculty members and leaders at Texas colleges and universities. The program came into being by legislation passed in 2003 for the purpose of diversifying faculty and staff at Texas colleges and universities to better reflect our student bodies and the population of our state. Since its inception in 2003, several hundred faculty and staff have been added to the ranks of faculty and leaders from unrepresented groups due to the program. You will be hearing in just a moment from a distinguished member of the University of Texas faculty who has participated in the program and who is in Texas because of this program. In 2011, the program was discontinued because of the state, quote, budget crisis. The program, however, is funded through a set-aside whereby each institution of higher education in Texas sets aside a portion of its tuition collected from each student enrolled in a doctoral program equal to $2 for each semester credit hour for which a student is enrolled. At the time the program was discontinued in 2011, approximately 60 faculty and leaders employed in Texas colleges and universities were recipients of the program. The current proposed legislative LAR request of the coordinating board includes a request to reinstate the program, which already has over $700,000 already collected in that program. We support strongly the inclusion of this program, and it is simply waiting for legislative authorization. We have also brought letters of support from the state initiator, from the Senate initiator of the program, that's back in 2003, that's Senator Leticia Van de Putte, and a letter also of support from Representative Trey Martinez Fisher, who is chairman of the Mexican American Legislative Caucus, who are supporting the program. And we have a packet for you that has those letters as well as our testimony. Now I'm going to call, my 3 minutes are up, I'm sure. I would like to call upon Dr. Victor Saenz, Associate Professor at the University of Texas at Austin and a recipient of the doctoral program, and is in Texas, as I said, as a result of it. Many of you today are probably familiar with the distinguished career that Dr. Saenz has at UT and the seminal work that he has done. Working with programs and students to address critical issues of admission, retention, enrollment, and success of first-generation and low-income students. Dr. Saenz.
Thank you, Dr. Valdez. Good afternoon, Chairman, committee members of the committee. My name is Victor Saenz, Associate Professor at the University of Texas at Austin in the Department of Educational Administration. I'm here today representing many other Texas-based scholars and higher ed administrators and leaders that have been direct beneficiaries of the Doctoral Incentive Loan Repayment Program. I'm a testament to the, quote, grow your own strategy that this particular program enhances, and I urge you to support its inclusion in the THECB legislative appropriations request for the upcoming session. So a little bit about my story. I graduated from La Jolla High School in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas. I'm actually a second-generation Longhorn as well. Proud product of public schools at every step of my educational journey, literally from kindergarten all the way up to graduate school. Graduated from UCLA with my doctoral degree. And as a higher education researcher, I'm very concerned with issues of college access and affordability. I think all of us could share in that, especially for students from historically underrepresented backgrounds. So this includes low-income students and first-generation students, immigrant students, et cetera. So in recent years, we know that students and families are increasingly having to find creative ways to finance higher education for their children, especially since these dollars are not stretching as far as they used to, and scholarships are obviously becoming more and more competitive. So loans, therefore, are becoming a primary strategy in a way that many students, both working class and middle class, are having to use to finance their undergraduate education. So you probably know some of the data, but it bears repeating. The average loan debt of graduating students in 2012 nationally that earned a bachelor's degree was close to $30,000. Just to compare that to a more affordable option at UT Austin in 2012, that same cohort, the average student loan debt was just over $26,000. So graduate school is increasingly out of reach for a lot of these students from these underrepresented backgrounds, especially because there are fewer financial aid options available to them if they want to pursue post-baccalaureate study in graduate school. So meanwhile, of course, we know students in our Texas public colleges and universities are becoming increasingly diverse, that is, student bodies, partly because of shifting demographics in the state. But yet our faculty and administrative ranks are not necessarily following suit. In fact, I think given this new financial aid reality for our students and this demographic reality that the state of Texas and nation are grappling with, I think we need to continue to find creative ways to foster the kind of opportunities that will ensure our public institutions can continue to serve this changing population base of Texas. So the Doctoral Incentive Loan Repayment Program is one such proven strategy. Its Grow Your Own approach provides this key incentive to diversify the pool of eligible professionals that are going into the faculty or higher education leadership ranks here for the state of Texas. Its funding is already assured through the tuition set-aside program that's been in place since 2003. And it really provides, I think, an important signal to prospective hires across the country. As I mentioned, I did my doctoral work at UCLA, and of course I was as anxious as anybody to get back to Texas. But as I was looking for that next path in my career, I really looked to this particular program as a recruitment tool. So for what it's worth to all of you, I think we ought to think about embracing this as a creative strategy, continue to cultivate that grow your own talent within the state of Texas. And let me tell you, I really made the most of my opportunity to come back to the state. The program helped me to retire over $70,000 in student loan debt that I accrued over 10 years of higher education, both here in Texas and in California. And there's so many others that would benefit similarly. But the other way that the state of Texas has benefited, in my view, is by allowing me to venture into the ranks of tenure track faculty at UT Austin, and also bringing with that my own research agenda focused on how better to serve the needs of this growing population base of underrepresented students in higher education. So I truly have made the most of this experience of being able to come back home. This program, I think, is a testament to how we can, in fact, grow your own. In fact, there are hundreds of success stories littered across the state of Texas and potentially many, many more if we are continuing to support this program going forward. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share.
Gentlemen, thanks to both of you. Any questions?
I'm glad that we attracted fellow Bruin from
I thought there
California.
might be a comment coming there. Thought there might be.
We're not going to hold that against him.
No, not at all.
Dr. Valdez, how did you get through school?
Through loans, financial aid, and for my doctorate, it was my spouse, essentially.
Okay. Yours was loans and grants, Dr. Sines?
I had a merit fellowship at UCLA as part of the Spencer Foundation predoctoral training program. So the Spencer Foundation has a national program where they do try to cultivate talent in that way. The bulk of my loans were earned at the LBJ School of Public Affairs at UT Austin as a master's student. A fine institution, has been around well over 45 years now. And that education at UT Austin at LBJ School really allowed me to pursue a doctoral degree at such a fine institution like UCLA. And so, you know, in many ways, it catapulted me towards a doctoral degree. My doctoral degree was almost 100% covered through merit aid, merit support through UCLA and through the Spencer Foundation.
Thank you.
This program is important because we know that Texas institutions, even our Tier 1 research universities, UT Austin and Texas A&M, have a shortage of graduate student support compared to other major research universities. So it's a big issue here in Texas.
And if I may add, in my particular case, it really made the difference for me coming back to Texas. I had a job offer from the Gates Foundation as a program officer, and even though the pay was different scale altogether, the point was that here was the way the state of Texas was showing me an opportunity to recruit me back with an incentive that, and as a higher ed researcher, I'm familiar with these kinds of incentive programs that are out there. Other states have them as well. So, I think we have the doctoral incentive program. We also have a border loan incentive program. We have other incentive programs for other professions as well, medical profession and whatnot. So there's a whole litany of other programs, similar type programs that the state of Texas has put into place, and be remiss not to acknowledge their worth as well, given the needs in the workforce at the professional levels, academic ranks, et cetera.
Just curious, how many members in the association?
There are about 250 members, professional members.
John?
So Dr. Valdez and Dr. Sines, thanks for coming today. We're very honored to have you here. And I'm new to all this. Explain to me, so you've gotten your master's degree, and you mentioned the figure. You said you had $70,000 in debt.
Yes, sir.
And now you're thinking about getting your PhD.
No.
Oh, no. He's a...
No.
I'm talking about your thought, how this, as you're going through. You understood what I said.
Yeah.
So, tell me practically how you became aware of the program, and then how does it work? You have to make an application, and then and did it address all of that debt? It's interesting to me to have somebody here that's actually benefited by it. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your question, Mr. Steen. So as a graduate student at UT Austin back in the late 90s, I finished the LBJ school in 99. I was definitely geared towards a doctoral degree program. And, as I said during my comments, financing for graduate school is even more sort of sobering than it is at the undergraduate level. It's really non-existent. But I was fortunate to find this merit-based opportunity at UCLA for me to leave the state, but again, all with the intention of being able to come back and be a public servant here in the state of Texas. And so I was aware of the incentive program or similar type programs because I happen to be a student of higher education. I study issues around access and affordability. I wasn't actually aware of this specific program until Dr. Valdez shared it with me back in 2007 when he was trying to recruit me to UTSA as a faculty member. I ultimately took an offer at UT Austin. It's my alma mater, but I'm certainly grateful that Dr. Valdez made me well aware of this as an incentive to be able to come back. And I have worked hard myself to be able to share it with others. I know a colleague in my own department, Dr. Richard Reddick, also was a graduate of UT Austin, went to high school at Johnston High School here on the east side, not 3 miles from here, did his doctoral work at Harvard, and this program allowed him also to come back. So there's many, many success stories like this. What we do, the ins and outs of it is we earn up to $20 in student loan incentive for every year of service to the state of Texas. And the criteria are such, and it's been written into administrative code here at the agency, but the criteria is such that, we have to have a tenure track position, or as an administrator, I believe you have to have a certain rank within a higher education institution in the state of Texas. Another important criteria for me in terms of my eligibility, I mentioned that I'm a graduate of La Jolla High School in deep South Texas. You have to have graduated from a high school where less than 50% of the graduating students do not go to higher education. So you can see all the sort of creative ways that the criteria is meant to really emphasize and target and cultivate that homegrown strategy. And like I said, it really made the world of difference to me to be able to do that. And as a result of that, and certainly my commitment to the state of Texas, I remain a very loyal, faculty member at UT Austin. But more so than that, I think it's allowed me to, to be able to do this work in this state. And I didn't get a chance to discuss, but in the packets you have more information about a program that I started, and I've had some great support from Commissioner Paredes, Assistant Commissioner Laredo, that targets Latino male students in education. So that's part of my research agenda. Project Males, it's called, Mentoring to Achieve Latino Educational Success. 4 years old now, based at UT Austin, and we're proud to be able to partner with UT San Antonio, with so many other higher ed institutions in this work focused on men of color, which aligns very well, I might add, with President Obama's recent initiative, My Brother's Keeper, which was launched back in February. So that gives you an idea of, the fact that I was able to come back and be supported in the way I have. That might not be present. That kind of sort of research activity may not be present had it not been for a program like this to be able to draw me back, and so many others that I could mention as well.
Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Agenda item 5A is a discussion of the audit of the agency-wide financial statements for fiscal year ending August 31st, 2013 by KPMG LLP. Susan Warren, senior partner at KPMG, will present this item to the committee. Susan, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also have with me Rebecca Goldstein, who's the audit manager on the account today, and it's a pleasure to be here before the board and the committee to present the results of the 2013 audit. In your presentation material, we have just a summary of the audit. But on the overall agenda is just a high-level reminder of what it is the committee hired us to do versus what the management team does for you. And we talked about that during the planning meeting, but I just like to remind people of that. And then actually get into the results of the audit, which you can see there, all the different items we're required to communicate. So on slide 2, just an overall reminder of management's responsibility here at the coordinating board is they are responsible for setting all the accounting policies, for creating the financial statements, for making sure there's effective internal controls over that process, and obviously making sure all that complies with the laws and regulations that you need to comply with, and then making all that available to us to do our audit. And at the end of the engagement, they do sign a representation letter saying that they gave us all that information and answered all of our questions for us and basically didn't hold anything back. And that letter is actually published in the final report that you have access to. And then the responsibility of the committee is to oversee that process, just being involved in conversations and setting the tone at the top and making sure the internal controls appear reasonable for the committee. Okay. Slide 4 is what you hired KPMG to do, is we take all that information, we do our audit work to actually express an opinion on the financial statements. And when we do that, we are required to look at controls specifically around misstatement due to fraud and or management override of those controls in place. Part of that required communication is if we have any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, those are basically breakdowns in controls. We are required to put those in writing to you. And then it does say we have to use, follow all our professional standards and our professional skepticism. And the last bullet says that there is required information that we're required to report back to you at the end of an engagement, which is what the next slides do for you. So on page 5, just an overall process, is you have a clean opinion. Technically, it's called unmodified, but that's what you want. That's the best kind of opinion you can get. And the key words here are the no and the no. There was no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in controls to discuss with you, and there was no uncorrected or significant corrected or uncorrected adjustments. And what that means is you can actually have differences in opinion on how to book a transaction that we agree to book, which is corrected, and then you can actually sometimes have adjustments that management doesn't choose to book, and we agree it's not material, and that's called uncorrected. So you can actually have two different types of adjustments, but the key is there were none of those. But that's why it says corrected or uncorrected. Questions on this slide? Because, this is the basis. It's a clean opinion. Yes. Slide 6 are some of those other things we're supposed to talk to you about. Is if you're to read the footnotes, footnote 1 is a summary of all the policies and procedures that are in place of basically how you do your accounting. And the key here is there was no significant changes from 12 to 13. A lot of times those changes can be by new standards, which there were none published. There will be for 14. In fact, we've had some meetings talking about that. So GASB has put some changes in place for 14. But there was nothing required for 13. And as a result of that, there's no unusual transactions either to discuss. Because a lot of times you can have transactions like if you were to shut down your loan program or something like that, then we would have to do a little extra work on that and have a conversation with you about those procedures. But there was nothing like that in the 13 audit. Slide 7 is the management judgments and estimates. You obviously do have an estimate in your financial statements, which is fairly large. It's the allowance for your doubtful accounts for your student loans, and of course the interest that goes with that. And so what we are required to do is to look at all the assumptions that go into that. Since it's an estimate, there has to be some decisions made and assumptions about how you're going to create that allowance. Some of it is the default rates. Some of it is trends and histories, what the current interest rates are, that type of thing. And so we looked at all that information and compared it to our knowledge of other industry standards and found it to be reasonable. Slide 8 is a kind of a summary of everything else that is required in the standards to discuss with you, but there is other information in your financials. There's a part at the front of it called Management Discussion Analysis, you might know as MD&A. It's a very high-level summary of what happened during 13. And then at the back, there actually is a required schedule of budget to actual, which is something that GASB requires for the general fund. And so we do take all of that to combine with the balance sheet and the income statements and the footnotes, make sure it all ticks and ties back and forth, and make sure it makes sense based on our audit. We didn't find anything to adjust in there. There was no significant difficulties, no disagreements, no consultations, no other items significant issues to discuss. As I mentioned, the representation letter is published that your management team signs, so you can see that. And there was nothing else that we felt was worthy of your attention from an oversight perspective. Questions on that? Because that's kind of the high-level look at the audit. I do have a couple of extra slides on some what we call verbal comments, but that is the audit results. All right? Slide 9 is what we refer to as, I mentioned, there's no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, but there are things that are called deficiencies. I like to talk about verbal comments because those are items that didn't rise to that level of control deficiency, and you'll see on these slides where it says mitigation, and this is why it didn't. But there are also things that in our conversations in the past you had wanted to be apprised of. So here is a summary of those. The BMS system, which we've had a conversation about, it is a contract and an invoice approval system. I believe most of your conversation was focused on the contracting piece, but it also approves your invoices. And so that's where the financial statement audit focuses on, is on the invoice side. So when you have a contract in there, when somebody goes to get paid on that contract, the invoice has to go in there and go through the approval process as well. So what we found in that system was, you can see here that there was an employee who was granted access to BMS to submit, prove, and pay, which I think we all understand that's the segregation of duties issue. You don't want somebody to be able to do that. It was for short periods of time because of vacations, and it was a way to kind of keep things moving along. We also had 2 employees who had administrative access, which that by itself is not negative. You do have to have people like DBAs, if you will, to be able to do system back work. But the problem with these 2 people is they could also create vendors in MIP. So what they could do is set up a vendor and then also route invoices through with their administrative access. You had 2 users who had status administrator access, which in BMS, what that means is you can actually bypass all the approval workflows with that access. And so that's generally not granted. Now, the key takeaway of why these are just verbal comments is that we were able to do some extra test work with queries and looking at sign-off screens and things to make sure that none of these people use that access. There's actually logs in the system that cannot be altered by these people. And so we were able to pull those logs and make sure they did not use the access inappropriately, which is why it did not rise to a level of a significant deficiency. Usually when you're dealing with segregation of duties, you also have an access issue. We have what we call a periodic review. That is where you send out a list to your business process owners to say, Susan Warren has access to do these things in BMS. Rebecca Goldstein has access to do these things. Is that still appropriate based upon their job titles? Coordinating board does do that, but what we found in that process was that they were incomplete. You can see there that 4 of 13 responses were not sent back to verify whether they were or they were not accurate. So that by itself would have probably helped some of this because you would be able to see that some people didn't have the appropriate access. Questions on this slide? Okay, slide 10 is the CRS system, or the cash receipt system. It's a very similar system to BMS, except that it is where you log in all your cash receipts. So all your cash receipts, whether it's coming from the lockbox at the comptroller or walking in the front door or coming through credit cards or whatever like that, all go into CRS, where it routes to the appropriate accounting codes and either into Helms to Post if it's a loan payment, but it's all automated through the CRS system. We did again find some access issues. Now, the first one is the Xerox users, as you are aware of. You have to work under the DIR contract to run some of the systems in the back door. So 4 Xerox users had inappropriate administrative access. In other words, they could, basically go in and change things. They had access to change. And then we had 1 developer here at the coordinating board who had access to 4 generic accounts. And what that means is on a generic account, like if I were to log into a generic account, you can't tell it's me. A generic account is just a generic password. So it's a way, sometimes you have to have it to be able to make technical fixes on the back door, but you want to make sure that you know who has access to those accounts. Again, we were able to do test work to make sure that there was no inappropriate activity with those people. We were able to pull the logs to make sure they didn't inappropriately use that. And on this one, we did note that all was corrected by August 31st, 2013. along with the CRS system, change management. That is where we go in and pull, if you want to make a system change, whether it's coding or even maybe the way a report is printed, anything you want in the system has to go through like a ticketing process, if you will, to make sure that it's not going to mess something else up in the workflow and be tested and approved to make sure that it's appropriate. In one of those samples we picked, some of the documentation for the final testing and approval wasn't technically in the file. Like there is a checklist on this, and then you're supposed to sign off and all that. It wasn't there, but we were able to get some verbal conversation from multiple different people that were involved in that change, including the business process person on the end, to make sure that they had actually done it. It just, the documentation just wasn't available. Slide 11. This is a slide about terminated users. You'll see there's 3 systems here. There's the Helms loan system, the network, which is the underlying infrastructure, and then BMS we've already talked about. But if you'll see down the page, there was basically some terminated users, and those are basically employees who are no longer here. And in that process of leaving, you usually have to turn off all their access. And so you can see that their access was not turned off by the time we looked at the logs. But the key takeaway from a mitigation perspective is a lot of times, like with Helms and BMS, you can't get into those systems if your network access is cut off. So we were able to validate that their network access had been cut off, but basically their BMS was still active. Or we were able to go in on the network and look at logs to make sure nobody had actually accessed it after they were terminated. Those are our prepared remarks. If you have any questions or comments.
So just on that last slide, I mean,
Yes.
all of that's been corrected, all fixed. I mean, there was no indication that anything was wrong.
No, it's what I like to.
And it's all been corrected.
Yeah, I can answer that.
I was
yes.
going to say, because I haven't audited if it's been corrected.
Sure.
So I'm not sure I can answer that.
But she will be coming back and auditing
I will.
again.
Right, and that's what.
But yes, Bobby, we have corrected those. In fact, I have quizzed the staff at length. What are the corrective actions? What have we done? And both Sid and Ken and the other people that are responsible for this have assured me, and we'll know when she comes back.
Because, I mean, obviously with terminated users and such, I mean, there should be just a very defined, specific, followed process that catches wherever that could be. So hopefully we've got that now.
Yes, we have.
Really
And I've
locked
actually
down.
seen some recent emails where that
Great.
process is being put into place.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
And let me make a comment about verbal comments. When Susan and I did our conversation, I actually asked for more information rather than less. This is not necessarily information that's given. Obviously, you saw the audit report is exceptional, and I think you're to be commended and your team for that because it's a very good report. But I ask for that. I appreciate it. My comment to you is, even though I understand maybe it's more information than is normal, I wanted it out there so we could look at it, so you could see what the issues were and how they were being addressed, even though I think we should highlight their verbal comments, and the audit is very well done. So,
Absolutely. And that's why I was key on the mitigation piece on the slide.
yes. Any other questions, comments? Susan, thank
you very much. Appreciate it.
very much. Agenda item 5B is consideration of adopting a resolution authorizing the issuance of State of Texas college student loan bonds in one or more series, and delegating the commissioner the authority for filing of one or more applications to obtain a portion of the state's allocation for private activity bonds. Ken Martin, Interim Assistant Commissioner for Financial Services, and Mr. Richard Donahue from McCall, Parkhurst, and Horton will present this item to the committee.
Thank you. As you well know, we have the student loan program, as we discussed on the financial report. We issue general obligation bonds for the support of the cash flow for the need of those bonds. It is not supported by general revenue or GRD, et cetera. Each year we issue about $100 million on average in bonds to support the needs and the cash flow needs for those particular loans. With this year coming up, we issued bonds about $113 million back in October, and we are coming up almost a year from that point where we need to begin to issue another round of bonds. We have enough authority for $82 million in our current authority for that, and that will meet our cash flow needs for the next year's period, and we'll be back probably sometime next summer. So with that said, we are here to not only ask for and seek approval for the $82 million authority, but also to, since that will be the limitation of our authority, to seek $350 million to more authority that will support us for the next 3 years. And with that said, I will turn it over to Richard to discuss the resolution, and we'll be able to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ken. For the record, my name is Richard Donahue. I'm an attorney with the law firm of McCall, Parkhurst, and Horton. We serve as bond counsel to the coordinating board along with May Holmes Bolden. We're here to talk about the resolution. I'm just going to hit some of the general high points, and if you have any other questions, please feel free to ask them at any time. The resolution that you're looking at in your packets is the official action of the coordinating board authorizing the issuance of up to $81,150,000 worth of new money bonds. Last year, the board authorized a combination new money refunding authority that we did one refunding issue earlier in the year, and then the new money piece that Ken alluded to. In this case, there are no refunding candidates, so this resolution looks more like the resolution that the board adopted in 2012, which was just a pure new money authorization. The bonds are payable from student loan repayments. They also carry a general obligation pledge of the state of Texas, which has never been called upon, but it does allow the bonds to trade at a AAA, the state's AAA rating, and saves everybody money. The resolution delegates the pricing of the bonds to the commissioner, to the final terms, and the bonds can be issued any time for a full year period. We anticipate that they'd be issued later this fall, but the delegation lasts for a full year. The delegation also provides for that the bonds can be sold either on a competitive basis or a negotiated basis. A competitive basis would be where we'd go into the market and take blind bids from all the potential underwriters, which is what the board has done the last several times. That's the default option of the resolution. Sometimes market conditions are such that your financial advisor would advise you that a negotiated offering might be more favorable. We don't anticipate that'll be the case, but the resolution does provide that flexibility, which the negotiated offering would be where you'd work with one particular underwriter who would go out and market the bonds in the market, and so they would have to specifically advise the board of that. But First Southwest Company would make that advice, but right now they're advising that we would go ahead and prepare the transaction as a competitive transaction. The resolution also approves a form of preliminary official statement, which is the disclosure document that investors would receive. Obviously, that will be updated as we get closer to taking the bonds to market with the more final information, but that form is in your packets as well with the resolution. Ken also indicated that the resolution does allow us to go to the Bond Review Board and apply for $350 million of additional carry-forward authority, which would give us the volume cap to issue additional bonds. This 81,150 is the last of the volume cap that they applied for 3 years ago. That's a step in the process. You have to go to the Bond Review Board and apply for this volume cap before you can issue the bonds. And so we're using up the last of our 3-year volume cap that we applied for at the end of 2011. And because the delegation does span over a year's period, we thought and this is the last of that, we thought it prudent to go ahead and put the authorization here to get the next 3 years of bonding authorization going forward. And to issue those bonds, you would still have to come back to the board for another bond resolution, so you're not approving $350 million of bonds to be issued under this resolution, just the $81,150,000 maximum amount. And the resolution also approves the other standard ancillary agreements that would go along with the financing.
With that, are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. This is an action item?
Yes, sir, it is.
And your action, this is a committee of the board, so
yes,
we're approving this resolution?
Yes.
And once again, this is something somebody that's sort of new to this can ask. Well, why since we've got a board meeting tomorrow, why wouldn't the board be approving something like that?
Well, it'll come forward, I believe.
It will go to the full board.
It has to come
so
through
this is a committee
first
approval to go to the board.
It will be approved by the board also.
Then I so move.
Okay. So, Ken, who's our FA? First Southwest?
First Southwest.
Okay. That's it, though. We don't have them aggregated with somebody else. First Southwest will be handling everything related to that.
Well, we'll have another action item. I mean, I'll let Patrick answer in more detail.
Patrick, I apologize. I didn't introduce you, but
that's all
welcome.
Right. Patrick Krishock, board staff. First Southwest is the sole financial advisor on this transaction. Estrada Hinojosa is our underwriters, FA pool, and they'll be in on the next transaction.
Got it. Okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Good.
So let me state it, and then I'll get you to move. So the motion would be to adopt a resolution authorizing the issuance of the State of Texas college student loan bonds and the delegation to the commissioner to the authority for the filing of one or more applications to obtain the portion of state allocation for private activity bonds.
That sounds like we're adopting the resolution.
We are,
well,
but we do as a committee.
What we're really doing as a committee is recommending approval by the board. All right. So move.
Okay, John. I have a motion by John and a second by Bobby. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda item 5C is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee regarding the Coordinating Board's legislative appropriations request, the LAR, for the 2016-2017 biennium. Dr. Alonzo will present the items to the committee. Linda Battles and David Gardner will also be available to provide additional information and respond to questions. Dr. Alonzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to lay out the legislative appropriations request, hit the highlights, the changes that have occurred since we last discussed it at the June 26th board retreat, and then we will be glad to answer any questions. So, as a matter of background, just real quick, let me lay out what the instructions were from the LBB and the leadership at the Capitol. We were asked to come in with a legislative appropriations request where the amount that we requested does not exceed the base budget of general revenue and general revenue funds for FY14 and 15, the current biennium. We were also asked to come in with a schedule of budget reductions equal to 10% of GR, general revenue, and general revenue dedicated, in two 5% reductions, and those are to be ranked in an inverse order. In other words, the ones that were more important towards the end of that schedule. Let me make it clear, and I think we discussed this, that unlike other years, this is a schedule that identifies those reductions if the legislature has to go there. Unlike other years in too recent of memory, painful memory, where we actually had to reduce our base budget. So let's hope that they don't have to go there, but we will comply with the instructions. When the commissioner issued to us his instructions for coming up with those reductions, he gave us certain guidelines. He says, make sure that you preserve as much as possible those financial aid programs that serve poor students. He asked us to preserve as much as possible critical programs that help improve the quality of life in Texas, not just in higher ed, but overall. Ask us to preserve funding for administrative costs such as our IT infrastructure that we have discussed, which is becoming a critical problem at the agency. And he said, do not come to me with a 10% across the board cuts. That would be too easy. So, in other words, he wanted us to be deliberate about it, to be thorough, and to really put some thought into it, which I can say we did. So the instructions went out in late May to the division heads and to the units, even though that was before we received the instructions from the state. We made some assumptions. We wanted to get started because we knew we would be on a short deadline. The division heads, the assistant commissioners, submitted their recommendations to the senior management team, David, myself, and Linda. We reviewed those. We asked a lot of questions. We met. We sent it back for adjustments, corrections, so forth. And then the three of us made a recommendation to the commissioner. And along the way, and this is a little different than the last time that we did the LAR, we solicited plenty of input from our stakeholders. We talked to the schools, we talked to the GR, the governmental relations people at the schools, we talked to the offices downtown. So we have solicited as much input as we can from all stakeholders, including the board, which, if you recall, we had quite a healthy discussion at the retreat on June 26th. So what we have before you is to go over today is our list of exceptional items, requests. There's a lot of information that is behind that, but I'm going to go over the highlights. Our 10% budget reduction schedule, and the administrator statement, which is one of the requirements. So as far as the exceptional items request, there are two things that have changed since the last time that we discussed this with you at the retreat. Number one, at that time, we told you that we had just been notified that the coordinating board will participate in the implementation of CAP, which is the centralized accounting and payroll system that the state has been implemented. We've been chosen to participate in that in 16-17 biennium. And while the controller will be funding the implementation and the software and so forth, they ask us to put in a line item for any resources that we would need to implement that change. At that time, when we briefed you on this, about this at the retreat, we did not know how much to put in there. We were in the midst of doing our due diligence. Our team went out and talked to the staff of those agencies that have implemented this, or in the process of implementing it. We got a very good idea of what it takes, how many resources, not only for the training, for the design, for the documentation, but also for backfilling of those staff that we now have that will have to be diverted to work on that implementation. So the list that you have before you, while at that time it had the item, it now has the amount, which is
$2.7 million.
$2.7 million.
For the biennium.
For the biennium. I guess I have it in front of me. I should look at that. The other change that you will see on this list of exceptional items is the testimony, is related to the testimony that you just heard. And we have placed a line item in here for the doctoral incentive program. The amount is $700, and I apologize. I thought I had it right in front of me.
$350 a biennium.
$350,000 per year of the biennium. It is placed at the bottom of the list here. Well, there is a page. They're not numbered, and that's why I'm having a hard time.
Directly after the detail on the exceptional items.
It's after the detail of the exceptional item? Okay, I was looking for it right before it. I apologize.
Doctor, help us with this because we're having a little bit of hard time following where you are in the paperwork.
Yes, I should point to that schedule.
Found it.
Okay.
After the exceptional items.
It is after the exceptional items descriptions.
23 and 24, and then is the
That's right.
chart.
Yes, and I apologize, we didn't number those pages, but it looks like this, Mr. Steen.
How far
So
in?
you're halfway through, John.
About halfway.
Yeah.
Let's see. The mayor over here is looking for it too. Let's see. This one?
Yes. I apologize. We should have numbered those pages, and It's been put together up to yesterday or a couple of days ago. So anyway, so that is the list of exceptional items with the information that you just saw right before that goes into detail. So that has $350,000 per year for a $700,000 request for the biennium for the doctoral incentive loan repayment. The other change that you will see on here from the time that we discussed this at the retreat is item number 6, where per your request at that retreat, you asked us to increase the amount for the GME request to $40 million for the biennium. It is not part of the request, but if you recall, Dr. Tischer asked us at the retreat to provide the board additional information on JAMP, and that has been provided in here, and we send that out. It comes right after, in the blue pages, response to board member inquiry, and that is the additional information that he wanted on JAMP. So those are the changes that we have that have occurred since June 26th. The other changes, or the other document that I want to discuss changes to would be on the second page of this document, which is your color. This one should be easy to find. The color, multicolor page that has the 10% reduction. One of the things, and I believe I disclosed this at the board retreat and have been repeatedly disclosing it, is that we were working off an assumption of what our base budget would be. We were pretty close, but we knew that the final figure was subject to approval by the LBB. They actually tell us what is to be included and how much the base budget is going to be. We received that final base budget, it's called the base reconciliation, last week. This item or this page reflects that base budget. In summary, what they did is they took out the funding for Baylor College of Medicine, not because they're eliminating that funding, but because they want to handle it through the formula process, as similar to how they handled the formula funding for all the health-related institutions. So that came off our base, and of course the 10% that we had associated with the funding for Baylor College of Medicine also came off of this schedule. The other item that is a change is they ask us to move the origination fees that we budget for coming out of the Be On Time program. We had proposed that to be budgeted in strategy A12, which is the student, well, it's not on here, but it's the student loan program. They ask us to move that down to the Be On Time strategy, which is where the funds are, and to keep that strategy for loan programs off of the base, off of the reduction schedule. The third item is they ask us to add back approximately $47.1 million of supplemental funding that the agency received at the end of the FY13 of the 13th session, where they gave us $30 million for the Hazelwood exemption program, 9.3 for GME, and 7.8 for the one of the loan repayment programs. Excuse me, the family practice. And so we added that back on here, and of course took the appropriate cuts to that. The bottom line is that when we discussed this with you, we had asked you to consider $134 million of cuts. Now the revised figure is $130 million. The priorities did not change. We kept it the same. We're still trying to protect those financial aid programs that are so vital to the state of Texas if they have to go here. And so what you have, and as I've said many times before, unfortunately, because 96% of our funds of our budget, of our appropriation, is in trustee funds, that we have to cut financial aid if we're going to get to 10%. There's just no way of doing it. Mathematically, it is impossible to get there without cutting financial aid programs and those programs that we deem important and vital. But what we have done is we put them towards the bottom of the priority list. Hopefully, they will never get to that point.
So I just have a question on that, just for my own clarification. So it's just what you said. We've got the cuts, but because we've force ranked them the way we have, they may or may not actually be cuts.
That's right.
These aren't just givens that we've taken 8%, 7%, whatever it is. That may or may not come into play.
That's right. They've asked us to put it out there in case they have to cut budgets. So that is a high-level presentation of the LAR. So what we would ask the committee today is to approve this and move it forward to the board, to the full board tomorrow. The next steps, it will be inputted into the ABES system. That's a state program. It is due on Monday, July 28th. So we will be taking whatever the board approves tomorrow and working feverishly to get it in by Monday at midnight. Then the next step will be there will be hearings conducted by the LBB and the governor's office. Has been scheduled for September 18th. And then after that's a statutorily required hearing. After that, the LBB will file a budget, typically in mid-January, and then it goes through the process of the legislative session. Linda, did you and David want to add some things?
I just wanted to point out, and David pointed this out, the first two on this list shouldn't be on here because we're not reducing those programs. The engineering recruitment program and the Texas teacher residency program. So that was just a oversight. So the cuts actually start where you see reduction ranking number 1 all the way down to number 30. I just wanted to point that out. The other thing I wanted to go back to was the exceptional item request. And we had mentioned that the doctoral incentive loan repayment program was put there as a placeholder at number 24, but it's entirely up to you to, well, one, whether you want to accept it on our exceptional item list, and number 2, whether you want to bring it up on a higher priority compared to some of these other items that are here.
So we kind of have this backwards. Am I right? I mean, you've got...
Yes. The budget cuts are...
24 is at risk on the other sheet. Okay. 24 is pretty safe for... I mean, so it's kind of...
The budget reduction schedule shows where we want the cuts to be made first at number 1, and then the cuts to be last at number 30.
All right.
So trying to preserve Texas grants above all.
And on the exceptional items, it is in rank order, number 1 through number 30.
Just we're asking for money instead of taking it away.
Yes.
Questions? Jerry?
Yeah, after looking over this, and I'm sorry I couldn't make it to the board retreat meeting, or I would have brought this up with Dr. Tischer as well. I've read through the JAMP report, and although I do think the JAMP program is great, I might suggest eliminating their appropriations request. What that $2 million is going towards is, from my understanding, is giving student or the 672 students that are in the current JAMP program an increase in their stipend of $3,000, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Compared to how much debt they're going to have when they finish medical school, I feel like that's really not going to make that big of a difference as far as recruiting more people into JAMP or maintaining those people that are in JAMP. If you read through the JAMP report, they actually said that the biggest things that get students to come into JAMP, or the biggest reasons they want to join JAMP, is the incentive, or not the incentive, but the research that they get to do over the summer and the activities they get to perform, and then the fact that they get automatic admission if they complete JAMP with certain qualifications as far as GPA and MCAT scores go. So giving them an extra $3,000 I don't think is really going to incentivize that many more students to want to get into the program. I think the incentives are already there, and they already have plenty of people that want to go into JAMP. I think that $2 million could be used better elsewhere. For example, the Family Practice Residency Program. Part of that program also goes towards supporting rotation sites in rural areas. And if you wanted to increase or wanted to get more students or more residents to take their residency in a rural site and eventually practice in a rural site, you want them to go on rotations at those sites to get them interested in. And so that I think is one of JAMP's primary concerns, or one of the reasons that JAMP was created, was to try to get students that primarily never get a chance to go to medical school, and then hopefully they'll come back and practice in the communities that they were raised in. And so, and looking at the figures for JAMP, it didn't seem like, I think 2/3 of what I saw, or their figures of people who go through JAMP actually stay in Texas for their residencies. And if you stay in Texas for your residency, chances are you're also going to practice in Texas afterwards. So if you wanted to make that cut in JAMP, what I'm trying to say is that you could divert that money towards something like the Family Practice Residency Program and earmark it for rotations and try to increase or incentivize students to go on rural medicine rotations, in the hopes that when they go on those rotations, they choose rural medicine as their residency, and then go on and stay in Texas and practice rural medicine. Does that make sense?
Okay, I'd just like to add one clarification. Stacy Silverman knows the program backwards and forwards. One thing that's different about the program that you didn't mention is that the students receive support as undergraduates, financial support as undergraduates, and they have to be economically disadvantaged students to begin with. If you look at the figures, a little bit more than half who started the program actually enrolled in medical school in Texas. And so I think we don't have a comparative group to say, okay, how much higher is that get rate into medical school among economically disadvantaged students. That's one thing that's missing, but I do think that's a pretty impressive number, that you identify these students at a very early age, and then they're supported through the undergraduate school and get experiences, but they also get financial support. And then in terms of the cost of overall education, I think you're correct, and I think Dr. Tischer was making the point that it's not a lot of money per student, and that I think a similar point to you're making, that what difference does $3,000 make? But I do think when you're poor, $3,000 makes a difference. And Stacy may want to add something more.
I'm just going to echo what Dr. Gardner just said. Just that one of the wonderful things about the JAMP program is that it's actually attracting students out in those regional universities into medicine. And again, I'm going to echo what you just said about the reality is the attraction is that guarantee to medical school. So you're absolutely right on that. It's a tough decision.
Yeah, so. I'm not real sure.
We like them both.
Yeah, that's exactly what I heard. And I'm going, well, where would you put the money for the best value and then prioritize it? I mean, Jerry, were you advocating that to do none of that, to take all of that JAMP money and put it into the family practice residency? Is that what your bottom recommendation was?
Okay, yeah. In short, yes, something like that, or earmarking it for more rotation sites specifically, because once you go on rotations and you decide you're going to go do a residency, and once you do a residency, you're fixed. But like a rotation site, you're just trying out different things, different types of medicine, like rural medicine or family practice or OBGYN. And so if you put more money or set aside or incentivize doing more rotations in rural areas or in rural programs, you're more likely to have a student go to one of those and then see that they really enjoy that and then actually end up practicing.
So my question is, you've got essentially $16 million already in that.
Is that enough?
Is that enough, or does it make an appreciable difference to add that $2 million to it, or is it that $2 million a better investment in the JAMP program as it stands? That's where to your point, Stacy. Yeah, you're both good.
Both good.
And do we leave a little in one and leave the other that's still a good bit more?
Absolutely. I will say this: the family practice program has the rural rotation component. At its height, that program had about 80 residents that would rotate out into rural communities. Because of the budget constraints, we can only afford to send out about 50. So, and they do get about $3,000 a piece to go out and do a rural rotation. That really hasn't gone up. I think it's actually $2,000 and for a very long time. That program, the family practice residency program, took some substantial cuts two biennia ago. And we're just making progress to get that back on track. Now, that program supports 29 family practice residency programs located across the state and supports about 730 residents. So it's a strong program in that it's been around for a very long time. JAMP 2 is a very strong program. It's been around for quite some time, and it's funded around $10 million right now. So these are difficult decisions for you, and you just need to know the information. I will say this: we have some additional residency funding this time around, which we got $16 million to support 6 new programs, 5 of which were funded. So those programs are up and underway, and we'll begin to make new residency positions, which will be attractive to hopefully those medical students coming out, so that we'll get them to stay here. There's also a primary care innovation program, which we may see some streamlining of medical education and residency training. We could see what's going to be maybe a 3+3 model of getting a student into a medical school and then getting them out, and so they can practice with maybe a rural component. We don't know yet. That RFA will hopefully get released in the next couple of weeks after the board meets and takes a look at it. But so again, difficult choices, and you all. I will say that we gathered input from stakeholders, and we invited all the folks from the field to come in, and the JAMP folks did come and ask for this. They requested this funding. They felt like it was important to their students, and we're providing that information on to you all.
And just a point also, there's several champions in the legislature for this program, namely Senator West, who represents the Dallas area, Representative Giddings in the House, and pretty much the Black Caucus in the legislature. And just so you know what the legislative support is, we got some positive feedback from some of those offices when they saw our exceptional item request that had that exceptional request for JAMP on there. And just also to clarify that we're talking about an exceptional item request which would be above the base, and so JAMP, as Stacy mentioned, has $10.2 million, so this $2 million would be on top of that, making it a $12 million program. And then family practice currently is at a base of $12.8 million, and we're asking for $16 million on top of that.
And sorry, just to clarify, I was just using the family residency as another program where you might be able to get more value if you wanted to create more physicians in rural areas or in areas that are commonly underserved. There might be another program on here that that the board feels needs more money or something like that. But I just wanted to give that as an example. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay.
And understand there's not a giant pot of money that we get to move around. What we're trying to do is just say what's an appropriate level for each of these items.
Prioritize.
Yeah, and then you prioritize down. Other questions, comments? I guess what's the pleasure of the committee for adjusting that?
One thing, if we're, and you're talking about the exceptional items list?
Yes.
Okay, that's sort of a wish list that we have. So I don't think we need to be thinking in terms of moving the money around. You just drop it, right? Doesn't that make more sense, Mr. Jenkins?
I think certainly that's an option.
And it's really ultimately what you feel comfortable with requesting in additional funding. So we have close to a $300 million request.
Yeah. Right.
And so the legislature obviously isn't going to be able to fund every single one of our requests.
Right,
which is
but
why
we're talking about, like, where would you divert that money to? But that's not the way to think about it.
Yeah, I don't think that's how this works.
Right. If we want to drop it, we just drop it.
You could certainly lower the priority. My concern is that I know Senator West's office, or Senator West, is very keenly interested in this. And I think some other offices might be very surprised to see this just evaporate.
And I think that's kind of a compelling reason to not eliminate it or drop it.
Pretty compelling to me.
I think that we had because you guys just added the doctoral incentive loan repayment. So y'all, that number of the 700, the 354 biennium, but y'all just stuck it at the bottom, right? Without, and now, but we didn't have it on here previous.
No, we heard from TACHA representatives actually on the day of your board retreat is when I actually, after your board retreat, I spoke with them via telephone. And so that's why you didn't see it at that time.
So where is staff saying they think that should be as a priority?
The doctoral?
Yes.
Well, when we talked to the commissioner, Arturo, we talked to him before lunch about this. And I think he felt that it was really the pleasure of the board. We put it here as a placeholder. Is it more important than our video conferencing phone system upgrade, compliance?
Yes.
That's the question that you need to ask yourself, is where you think the priority is.
And then, yes, exactly. That was, as Linda says, that was just a placeholder. We put it down there. I mean, if I was to be pressed for a recommendation, I would not put it above the centralized accounting and payroll personnel system. I would
move it
not
up to 20.
That is number 19 right now.
Right,
So,
would you move
yes,
it up
I
to
would
20?
move it to 20. But that's, again, it's the pleasure of the board.
And my gut inclination goes, that sounds fine to me. I mean, I know that's a little bit of throwing a dart, but yet you kind of look by categorically, and you still feel that is a worthwhile program, and it's not a ton of money, but it sounds like it has some value. I appreciated the presentation this afternoon, and so that does make, to me, a quasi-reasonable spot to put it from 24 to 20.
Okay.
Everybody feel okay about that? And I guess the question is, do we want to do something with the JAMP program? Do we want to move it down? Do we want to adjust it?
I would tend, because of other issues, understanding exactly what you're saying, Jerry, but I might be hesitant to change that at this point. It's a long-standing program that's had a lot of success. Dr. Tesher was supportive of it also, as I recall. So I might not be juggling that.
In concurrence with that?
Well, and we appreciate those comments, Mr. Cordy, but one thing, there is an overlay of this whole thing with the legislature. And so it's important. Maybe that was something you weren't aware of.
No, I totally understand that JAMP is an important program, and I do support JAMP. I'm just saying that as far as when you're trying to figure out where you can get the best bang for your buck, when you're going to start appropriating funds, I thought of all the things that I read about in this packet, that to me seemed very small overall. Does that make sense? I thought that we could get more value elsewhere with that request. So I'm not saying destroy JAMP. Okay, don't do that.
Well, I'll go ahead and I guess you need a motion.
I need a motion.
Is this going to appear tomorrow on the agenda? So we're making a recommendation.
We'll make a recommendation to the full
that's
board.
what will be.
May I, Mr. Chairman, point out one more thing? We have discussed this at the retreat, but I think it's important to note one more time. On the schedule of reductions, which, again, is just a schedule of reductions. We're not making the cuts. There are 3 programs that we identified as elimination.
Right.
2 of those are loan repayment programs, the OAG loan repayment program and the Board of Faculty loan repayment program. The third one is the Norm Hackerman, and if you recall, we discussed about that thing has been whittled down to almost nothing, that unless we get infusion of funds, it's very little point in keeping that. And we also, while we're not asking for outright elimination, you will notice that the top 10% scholarship fund is recommended on that to be phased out over the next biennium, leaving just enough funds for the renewal students. So again, this is not new, but I thought that would be important for me to bring up one more time. Linda?
And I since the commissioner's not here, and I believe he had invited a representative from the Office of the Attorney General to come before you to talk about their concerns related to our proposed cut of their program. And I don't know that they didn't sign up for testimony. They're not here, but their concerns were that I guess they felt this is a very vital program for their agency and for their high-performing attorneys. I think one of our recommendations will be to the legislature to transfer that budget over to the OAG's budget, because we find ourselves in this situation every time we're asked to submit a budget reduction schedule. It doesn't fit in with our priorities here at the coordinating board. And so, unfortunately, it finds itself in this situation each time. So that would be our solution and our recommendation to the legislature next session.
And that makes sense. I mean, I think if we're able to say that, we're, not getting too many people too mad.
Mr. Chairman, so
yes,
what you're asking us to do, we'll be adopting, I'll make the motion to adopt the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee regarding the LAR. And just to emphasize, we had this retreat, and Dr. Alonzo, you got lots of input from the board members at that time, and that was incorporated into this. So would the only change that we'd be talking about today would be moving the doctoral incentive loan repayment program from number 24 up to 20, and then moving everything else down?
Down 4, yes.
I mean, that's not a very eloquent motion, but
that was
perfect. But that's the
But
idea.
we understand it.
Okay.
Don, we get that?
And I'll second.
And you'll second that?
I got
Do we
it.
have any
Thank
other
you.
discussions? Okay, if not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Agenda item 5D is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee regarding a request to extend the contract for Helm student loan software annual usage and support fees for fiscal year 2015 with a total for the year not to exceed $1,300,000. Mr. Ken Martin, Interim Assistant Commissioner for Financial Services, will join us once more.
I am back. This is a request. We're on our 9th year, starting next year, for this contract out of a 10-year contract. This contract has a sliding fee as our portfolio grows. There's a percentage, 5 basis points applied to that. And over time, since the portfolio has increased over size, so has the fee. With that said, this is for approval for that contract for FY15 to the total of $1.3 million. Now, let me caveat that from the standpoint that the board also had asked us a year ago to look at alternatives and pursue a RFP process and solicit bids, et cetera. And for the past several months, we have done so. We do have some viable alternatives, of which I can't get into great detail because we are in the process of that, but in which the October board will have that discussion. We'll present the detail of the outcome. With that said, these alternatives that we're pursuing and in the final process of will have favorable pricing to this contract. So the intent is, what I'm requesting is for the full year approval, contingency just in case, but the intent is we would, in August, hopefully be able to issue an award and then begin scoping and implementation of the new software, depending on the vendor that will be. And the intent would be probably estimated around spring to do a cutover. And so we would not then, in that fact, realize the full cost of this contract, but would like it for the 1 year to just in case. You know how sometimes conversions can be, but our intent would be about April timeframe, sometime in spring, to be able to cut over. Our loan program, we've discussed the bond program, et cetera, in detail. We have about $1.2 billion of loans that this current software provides, and it is growing. We issue at least $100 million annually in student loans, and then we have some reduction with repayments, but it's a net gain every year as the program grows. So we need a system to continue. Obviously, this one would be the continuance until we can do a cutover.
Great. Any questions?
If there's any questions.
So once again, this is just, will this be approved by the final board? I mean, by the board?
It is. Excuse me. It is on the schedule, on the agenda for tomorrow.
Oh, good. So this is in the nature of this committee recommending to the board that this is a good thing to approve.
That's correct.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Do I have any further discussions related to this item? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Agenda item 5E is consideration of amending the existing contract for arbitrage compliance services with First Southwest Asset Management. Ken Martin and Patrick Krisak will present this item. Ken's already here.
Patrick, I'm here one more. Patrick's back. On this particular item, we have an existing contract with First Southwest. We have an arbitrage compliance support that they provide for us. So with approximately $50 million of bonds outstanding right now and growing with our portfolio, we need that service. And just for everybody's edification, the arbitrage rebate is an IRS compliant item for us. We are a tax exempt entity. If we were a bank, when you issue a loan, such as we do, on an interest rate, and then whatever your source of your funds for that, you would want a lower rate, and that differential is your gain or your profit. From our standpoint, we're tax exempt. We don't make a profit. That delta runs our operation. It's not funded by GR or GRD. With that said, there is an arbitrage rebate calculation and services provided by First Southwest in support of our bond program. And we have a contract that we had for 2 years with them for $100,000. This last year, we had two items, KPMG, the audit, which Ms. Warren just presented here, and they had a special request for a recalculation, just for validation, which we have not had in prior audits, as well as we had the IRS perform a review of our 2002 bond series, which they had through several other states, et cetera. Both those audits or reviews we've passed successful, but we did incur additional costs on that. So what this is asking for an amendment, since it's going over the $100,000 limit, which the Rule 1.16, we need the board approval for another $20,000. That will carry it, and we'll extend the contract through August 31st. That will carry us through the remainder of this fiscal year. And then the next agenda item will talk about going out for RFP for vendors for this service in the future.
And may I underscore and add that the IRS audit was, we got through it, and so I know $20,000 is nothing to sneer at, but it's worth every penny to get a clean audit from the IRS.
Questions?
We request your approval.
Move to approve.
Got a motion by Bobby
Second, and then I have
Second,
a question. So we were discussing Rule 1.16 earlier, and it said that between 100,000 and 750,000, that the committee could be the.
That's right. This will not go to the board.
So
if the committee approves it,
we won't see this on the agenda.
You will not see
tomorrow.
this on the
This will
board.
be
That's
the
right.
end of it.
Because it's only $20,000.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Agenda item 5F is consideration of authorization to issue a competitive solicitation for rebate arbitrage calculation services in the estimated amount of $200,000 for a 2-year period beginning September 1st, 2014. Ken, once more, will present this item to the committee.
Those we just discussed on the prior agenda item, we have the arbitrage compliance services that we need support of for support of our bond program. 831 will be the intent of the existing contract to terminate. We'll go out to a bid for a new contract. First Southwest is our current. We'll open it up for open bidding for the next 2 years, effective 9/1/14. This will be a $200,000 contract for that 2-year period. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
So move.
We've got a motion by John, second by Bobby. Questions?
So, Ken, let me see if I understand this $200,000. Whenever a bond issue is issued, that arbitrage calculation is done at that time. Is it to make sure it's in compliance with IRS guidelines?
Well, there's a couple different items where we use their services. One is in our financial reports. One item when we have 831 coming up here at this year end, we have the state required annual financial report, the AFR, which we submit. We have an entity, our service provider, perform the calculation so we know what our potential liability is for our financials. That actually gets booked on our financials as a line item. We also have our second set of financials, the agency standalone financials, which the board has requested each year, and have KPMG or an auditor come on board to audit. We also, with that audit, usually will carry that over. KPMG wanted an update since they come around April. This was the first year they requested that, but they wanted an update. I don't know if that will continue forward, but that's why the amount's a little bit more, just to build in that contingency, as well as any arbitrage calculations or services needed to perform for our bond issues as well.
Okay, but it's primarily for the new bond issues then?
No, sir. It would be for existing and new bond issues. Each bond issue requires a 5-year calculation, a 10-year calculation, and a 15-year calculation, and then when the bonds are retired, a final calculation. So the calculations are performed pretty much annually on each series of bonds.
So what we have is...
They're updated, excuse me.
Exactly. And we could have, I think...
That's based on prepayments or just the cash flows?
We send the rebate arbitrage consultants data from the accounting system, and they calculate what we're actually earning on the loans versus what we're paying in interest.
And it's down to a bond series level. So all our bonds may not have a rebate liability. You could have one out of the entire 15 series different bonds. One may have, depending on that calculation.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Agenda item, thank you very much. Agenda item 5G is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the Board related to the report on financial aid for college students in Texas fiscal year 2013. Senate Bill 1, General Appropriations Act, Rider 30, page 3 through 53, 83rd Legislature. Lisa Mueller, Interim Assistant Commissioner for Student Financial Aid Programs, and Jane Caldwell, Director of Grants and Special Programs, will present this item. Welcome. Good afternoon.
Is it on?
You do have the report
Hello.
here at your place.
Yes.
The annual financial aid report is really an excellent resource for policymakers, experts in the field, and also people who may not know very much at all about student financial aid but would like to know more about it. I think you all have it, don't you? At least it looks like this. Okay. The report provides a considerable amount of statewide data on the types of financial aid available to Texas students, the amounts disbursed, and the distribution of the main sources of aid in terms of financial need and other characteristics. It provides explanations of key factors such as federal need analysis, includes a glossary of commonly used financial aid terms, which is very useful. The report was prepared using data certified by institutions for the 2012-2013 fiscal and academic year. It includes two main components. First, a snapshot of the financial aid received by students attending nonprofit institutions in Texas. And second, analysis of Texas students who applied for need-based student aid. We generally refer to the first 22 pages of the report as a summary of the data, but there are quite a lot of data in those pages, and they're sliced and diced in many ways, and there are certain trends that are also highlighted. Page 2, if you turn to that page, you'll see there's a high-level summary with a pie chart showing that student loans accounted for almost 53% of student aid distributed in Texas in fiscal year 13. Of the $4.87 billion in student loans disbursed, about 94% were federal student loans. In fact, almost 3 out of every $4 in aid for Texas students came from federal funds in the form of loans, grant aid, and work study. Page 3 includes a pie chart showing sources of aid to Texas students in FY13. And even though the state's investment in student financial aid was over $580 million, this amount represented only 6.3% of the total aid to students during this period. Now I'll call your attention to one more chart on page 4, which shows a comparison of loans and grants by income level. It shows that there's a significant level of borrowing at all income levels, with the highest percentage of borrowing, almost 77%, by students whose family income is $60,000 or more. These students do not qualify for as much grant aid as do lower income students, and their families often need to borrow funds to meet the amount they're expected to contribute according to the federal need analysis, which is commonly known as the expected family contribution. So that sort of underscores some of the testimony that Dr. Syons provided. Even at the lowest income levels, there's quite a lot of borrowing. And finally, the 136 pages following the 22-page summary are appendices that provide the detailed data underlying the summary statistics, including information specific to students attending individual institutions. So if there's a particular institution or institutions you're interested in looking at, that's where you'll find it. The report will be posted on the agency website. And before I forget, I'd like to give special thanks to a couple of staff members, Ken Pond, who spent many hours preparing the report, pulling the data from the financial aid data system database, and Rafael Villarreal for his careful review of the draft. And if you have any questions, that's why this lady is here. Jane Caldwell oversees the staff that puts together the report.
Questions, John?
Okay, so the agenda item, Mr. Chairman, says that we're considering adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the Board relating to the report on the financial aid for college students in Texas. So what's the Commissioner's recommendation that we're supposed to be adopting?
Well, the Commissioner's recommendation is that you approve us submitting this report by the due date. Most reports that have to be submitted come to a committee.
So they're not recommendations in there in here that we're
No. There's no recommendation. No, right, not that summary. Just that you approve the report for submittal.
All right. All right. I so move.
Okay, so I have a motion by John, second by Bobby. Any additional discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. Agenda item 5H is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee related to proposed amendments to Chapter 21, Subchapter E, Sections 21.123 through 21.125, 21.128A and C, 21.129, and new Section 21.135 of Board Rules concerning the Be On Time Loan Program. Lisa Mueller Interim Assistant Commissioner for Student Financial Aid, will present this item.
The proposed amendments to the Texas Beyond Time Student Loan Program rules mirror the new provisions established in Senate Bill 215, and I'll summarize those changes. First, students attending institutions that do not offer baccalaureate degrees may receive renewal awards only. There is also a grandfather provision that allows these students to qualify for loan forgiveness based on the requirements that were in place at the time of the initial loans. Second, the funding source for loans to students attending private or independent institutions must be general revenue, whereas loans to students attending public institutions will be funded by general revenue dedicated tuition set-asides. And a note that I'll mention, I think Linda also mentioned it earlier, Senate Bill 215 prescribes the manner in which Beyond Time funds will be allocated to public institutions. However, the bill also requires that all state financial aid allocations be determined through the negotiated rulemaking process. Therefore, although a rule mirroring the statutory language for allocations to public institutions was posted to the Texas Register, after the posting, we realized that this rule needed to be proposed through negotiated rulemaking. So for this reason, we're not asking the board to approve the language under Section 21.128B, which has been struck out in your materials. No comment was received regarding this rule, and the first meeting of the Negotiated Rulemaking Committee for Beyond Time allocations to public institutions, as mentioned earlier, is going to be August 4th. And finally, a new section has been added to reflect Senate Bill 215 provisions requiring the board to implement measures to improve student participation in the Beyond Time student loan program and to improve the rate of loan forgiveness. Additionally, repayment and default prevention counseling must be provided to Beyond Time borrowers who are attending institution whose loan forgiveness rate is less than 50% of the statewide average, and to borrowers attending institutions whose default rates exceed the statewide average. We did receive one comment agreeing with that rule and conveying questions about how it would be implemented. So not long after the comment was received, we met earlier this summer with the Financial Aid Advisory Committee, which determined that the federal methodology using the 3-year cohort default rate would be the best approach. We do plan to post the institution's Beyond Time default rates and forgiveness rates in September on our website, and will provide updates on the online counseling module that is being developed at Texas Guaranteed with input from Coordinating Board Loan Program staff. Qualifying institutions will be asked to incorporate the new counseling procedure for Beyond Time borrowers in the spring of 2015. And that pretty much sums up the changes that are before you.
Questions?
Second.
Motion by Bobby and second by John. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 6, auditing. Agenda item 6A is update on internal audit reports and activities. This item is a reporting item only, does not require committee action. Mark Pale, Director of Internal Audits, will present this item. Mark, welcome back up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm in the unenviable position of standing between this committee and the evening's activity, so I'll attempt to be expeditious.
Awareness is a great thing, Mark.
How long is your report?
I actually have 4, so I'll attempt to make them very quick. 2 of them will be very fast. And this one in particular, this is an informational item. We bring to the committee at each meeting an update on our internal audit reports and activities. And since we had a special called meeting in May, that was the one report, I guess, that's been issued since the April regularly called AOC meeting. So really all of our activity or our effort has been in the area of that particular audit, and then the development of the audit plan that'll be presented for your approval, and then you can see the other projects that are in progress. So not a whole lot to report. There is one thing that I'll note for the upcoming meeting in October. We're working on an internal audit and compliance monitoring website. This idea came out of the external peer review that was conducted of our audit group back last summer, and it also received, I guess you could say, an endorsement from ICUT when we went through the negotiated rulemaking process for compliance monitoring. ICUT sort of chimed in and said that they would like to see some of our audit and compliance materials, audit reports, things like that, actually accessible on a website. And so we've been working to try to get there, and I intend to bring to the committee in October, hopefully the completion of that process, and we'll get that thing up and running. But other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 6B, consideration of adopting the annual internal audit plan for fiscal 2015. Mark?
Thank you. The proposed audit plan is in your materials, and I would like to walk you through a few of the key points of the audit plan that you have before you. First, we prepare this plan using risk assessment techniques, including obtaining the input of the board, agency management, and other key stakeholders. We draft a plan that meets the requirements of the state law that governs internal auditing, and that's the Texas Internal Audit Act. There's certain areas that we're required to handle as a function of an internal audit shop in the state of Texas. And so you will see in the audit plan certain required audits, and that includes such things as information security review, conducting follow-up audit work on the implementation of our audit recommendations, conducting a comprehensive internal self-assessment and reporting back to the board on that, and then the handling of investigation of complaints that get passed to us from various sources, primarily being the state auditor's office. And then lastly, although not a statutory requirement, we continue to provide support to KPMG in the conduct of their financial audit that Susan Warren just reported to you on earlier. And we have been contributing 50 hours worth of audit time to that audit, and it gives us a good view of the financial reporting risks that KPMG is looking at, as well as it gives us a price break on the conduct of that audit. So after taking into account these types of projects, we're left with enough hours to perform one additional review, and that's risk-based, and it's shown on your proposed plan, and that's the audit of the College Access Loan Administration. So what I would like to point out to the committee is that the balance between required audits and other risk-based audits is something that we need to be mindful of, and something that, as a board, I would suggest very deliberate consideration of the risk appetite of the board. In 2013, we developed a long-range roadmap that showed the major organizational areas and how often we could schedule work in each area based on our audit resources. I'd like to ask that Sharon, if she could pass a one-page document to you, and I can show you this long-range schedule and one particular item that I would like to draw your attention to. Thank you, Sharon. The document that you have before you, this document was developed right at the conclusion of our external peer review last year, and so the peer review had suggested that we try to develop in addition to an annual audit plan, a more long-range sort of presentation of how often we're able to get to the various areas of the organization. You can see that we've defined or broken our organization into 10 business units or areas. And so at the time that this was developed, we had myself and 2 internal audit staff. Then through some budget discussions, we went from myself to 1 audit staff after the development of this long-range plan. And so what I'm attempting to show here is that if you look at the green, the cells that are shaded in green, for the top 3 areas, those programs are so significant that we feel like we need to be conducting work in those areas every year. IT, loan program operations, and then grant and special programs. And you've heard a number of reports today that cover different aspects of those areas. Then for the remaining 6 areas, our suggested approach was to cycle through those areas so that we periodically, every 3 to 4 years, have some type of audit activity within some of these other major program areas. Not as significant as the top 3, but still, some sizable activities such as business and support services, the business function of this organization. So the green then represents, in the move from 2 audit internal auditors that reported to me to 1 internal auditor, you can start to see now the slippage on this long-range plan. So we had intended to do more IT work when this plan was developed, and so we really held off on that in the FY 2014 plan. We had intended to conduct some work. If you look at item 10 at the bottom, it's half the cell is shaded because we intended to do a contract management audit that's on this year's plan, but we're actually just starting that, and we're going to conclude that as next year starts. And then if you look at 2015, you see several shaded cells there indicating that from a long-range perspective, we'd intended to do some work with a reconsideration of our current resources. We're not able to get to all those areas. So I guess what I'm suggesting to committee is that I've prepared a risk-based plan for your consideration and approval today, but what I would like to do is I'd like to come back to the committee in October, and I'd like to present some benchmarking information and really take a look at the committee's risk appetite. What, from a cycle standpoint, how often can we get to these areas? For the major areas, certainly, my recommendation would be that we are able to conduct work in those areas every year. And in addition to that, conditions have changed since I started in 2012. As you're aware, the compliance monitoring function that reports to me. I also had a federal subrecipient monitoring function, one individual who now reports directly to me. And because of that, the workflow within our office, it's a good time to look at how we're staffed. Are we staffed sufficiently? And I would like to bring that information back to the committee in October. And at that point, if the committee decides that that more resources are available, then we can augment the plan. We can add additional audits based on whatever the committee's decision would be at that time.
All right, I have a question for you. You're saying you lost an internal auditor?
Yes.
Because what happened?
There were some budget discussions just prior to the 2014 budget going to the board, and I was asked at that time. I guess the thought was that we had 4 compliance monitors coming online, and so if we were going +4 on the compliance monitoring side, could we afford to lose 1 on the internal audit side? And at that time, my answer was, well, I think so. IT would be the one area that I have some concern about, that we continue to get sufficient coverage. And the answer was, I guess, predicated on some things that were in place at that time.
All right, but if you had that internal auditor today, then all the green off of here would disappear?
Most of it would, yes. I mean, much of it would. It's really...
well, I just say I don't have much of a risk appetite. As a board member, I would prefer that we... I don't know what all went into it, but I would, just based on what you're saying, I'd like for you to have that other internal auditor so we're not facing this.
Sure.
And Mark, your plan is to come back to us in October and make a recommendation that I would assume would take the green off this sheet.
Yeah, I really would like to do that, and I would like to do, I want to present it in a thoughtful way. When you look at benchmarking data, as you know, benchmarking data comes in all shapes and forms and sizes, and there's really no good, strict comparison between our organization and the type of internal audit function and responsibilities that we have. There's not another higher ed coordinating board out there. There are other state agencies, there are higher ed entities, there's sectors of business. And then when you look at benchmarking, you can look at expenditures per auditor, employees per auditor, assets per auditor, and no one of those fits us perfectly. So I think I need to put together some data, show you cumulatively what those look like, come back with a recommendation cumulatively as to what I would suggest in terms of adequate staffing going forward, including whether or not there needs to be, the level of staffing. Do we need one or two more entry-level positions? Do we need a intermediate level position that would report to me? And honestly, that's part of the burden that's contributing to some of this issue right now, is that I'm beginning to get certain direct reports that are coming to me that I cannot put an intermediate in there doing the review because of the type of funding that those positions are, like the compliance monitoring staff that are state funded that we got from the prior session. I can't direct them to review internal audit work. So I have to review all of their work. This federal subrecipient position, I have to review the 70-something projects that individual goes through. So I really would like to kind of do it in unison, a staffing suggestion, both how we're structured as well as the size of the operation.
And to that point, I guess, just like John's saying, removes the green, but I guess my question is, we're on the risk-based evaluation where you do have the X's, and you did think long-term. Was this thinking made when you felt that you were staffed appropriately, or is this wedged in to fit it too? Or, I look at this part and go, okay, well, there's some logic to the frequency with which those audits are made in these other areas. Or are you thinking that you're going to come back and say, no, it needs to be double that, or that's about right, or what do you...
No, I'm not anticipating, a huge change in staffing. Okay. I think when this was developed a year ago, that with an additional FTE, there was a sort of a comfort level.
So you're fairly comfortable with the frequency with which these are
every 3 or 4 year,
every couple of years, and you've got them staggered so that workload makes sense, and
correct.
The amount of risk, because to the point, none of us have a very high appetite for risk, I can assure you, but we also want to be reasonable that, okay, that sounds like a thoughtful plan to make sure that those have each been audited on a cycle that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so you're coming back in October with those recommendations.
Yes, sir.
So you're asking for a motion to approve, but we're going to come back and look at a updated staff and things like that.
Correct.
Okay.
No,
I don't think
no. The motion is to approve the audit plan.
Yes.
Correct.
As submitted, not
this.
Not this.
Not this. Just the audit
Right,
plan.
just the audit plan.
I think this just points out the problem.
Right.
Yes.
So I need a motion.
So moved.
Bobby. John, second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Agenda item 6A is update and compliance monitoring reports and activities. This is a reporting item only.
7A.
I'm sorry. Did I say so? No? Okay. Typo. Sorry. Yeah, it is. I'm sorry. It's 7A. It's typo on my script, and I just jumped right off the cliff. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mark. It is 7A. I'm sorry.
Very good. We completed 6 projects during this reporting period, and all of them, and this is on the compliance monitoring side, all of them pertain to formula funding, and you have the final audit reports included in your materials. There was only one of the 6 projects that contained reportable observations, and that was the audit that we did at Blinn College. And there were two reportable observations there that related to the need for Blinn to better document its contact hours that were reported to the coordinating board. And the final report shows that the management response from Blinn, they've identified the corrective actions either already taken or planned to beef up that documentation so that it is up to standard. You'll also see a listing of other projects in progress, and we're continuing to move forward and to accomplish our 2014 compliance monitoring plan. And with that, concludes my compliance monitoring update. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have about any of those projects or that work.
And this is a report only. Any questions for Mark? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item 7B is consideration of adopting the annual compliance monitoring plan for fiscal year 2015. Mark?
The proposed compliance monitoring plan is in your materials, and I'd like to walk you through a few of the key points of this plan, and this is one where we're seeking your approval. Again, we prepare, just like on the internal audit side, we prepare this plan using risk assessment techniques. On compliance monitoring through the negotiated rulemaking process, it gives us a little bit more structure in statute as to the risk factors that we use in order to prepare the plan. And a couple of the big factors are just the institution size, how much dollars are flowing to that institution, and then whether or not there's been any other audit work done either by us or other audit entities. And so those have a big influence on how we select our projects each year. Because we have such a diverse group of institutions, we want to ensure that all are getting some coverage, both public and private, as well as coverage of various sizes and categories of institutions from largest to smallest. With that in mind, I call your attention to the proposed plan. You'll see that the plan presents 25 audit engagements, and we've roughly split that 50-50 between formula funding audits and financial aid audits. You'll see coverage of public universities, public community and junior colleges, private universities, and then in other categories it picks up such things as health-related institutions and technical colleges. One other thing to note about the plan, we're using a new tool that we developed this year. It's a desk review methodology, and that helps us stretch our travel budget. And it also allows us to still, leverage our audit coverage. And so 12 of the 25 scheduled engagements that you see on the proposed plan will be performed using a desk review approach. And the other sort of side benefit of that is from a staff retention standpoint. If we conduct all of our work using site visits, not only is it more intrusive on the institutions of higher education, but it becomes more of a burden to continually send staff out on the road. So this desk review approach has sort of multiple benefits in terms of being a less intrusive process, but also helping us to kind of balance the travel assignments that the staff have. One other aspect of desk review, because we're not on site, there's always a concern about, well, potentially we're missing something, or we could somehow be misled. Certainly, if there's any indication in our review process that something is afoul or there are additional questions, we have the ability to convert that to a site visit so that we can further explore anything that we need to. So the plan that I have before you, I'm asking for your approval, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
So the desk review piece, that's new, so I guess we'll evaluate as to what we think its effectiveness is. Do we have experience in this or other organizations that we're kind of benchmarking off of or following?
Absolutely. Actually, my prior job extensively used desk reviews, and for the current year, we're piloting. We've done a couple of them in this current fiscal year. and we're tweaking the process. We're learning as we go. And certainly after we get through 1 year's worth of additional desk reviews, I think at that point we'll have enough information to say, do we need more, do we need less, and that type of thing.
We're anxious to see how that goes.
Yes.
Dr. Alonso, but just to clarify, so we're approving this plan, but it'll be approved by the full board tomorrow?
It does not require full board approval.
Doesn't? Okay.
Just the Agency Operations Committee.
So we're the final word on this?
That's right.
All right.
For both plans.
For both plans.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. This concludes the Agency Operations Committee meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Well, I have a question. I'd like to continue, looking at these issues that came up with Rule 1.16. And Mr. Franz, I'm glad you came back in. The Rule 1.16, we had to go through the rulemaking process on that, and that really addresses approving all of these contracts. But I was talking earlier about signatories. Is that something, if we wanted to look at that and change it, is that just something we could do through board action?
The signatory portion, we could do that through board action. We could do that as a procedural matter in-house. It's whatever the board's pleasure would be.
But we wouldn't have to go through rulemaking on it.
Well, if the board action, for the board to amend Rule 1.16 would require rulemaking. So if you wanted to enshrine that procedure in Rule 1.16, we'd have to go through rulemaking. It's unlikely we'd get any comments because it's simply an internal housekeeping matter.
All right.
Not going to tell you we won't, but I doubt if we will. And so we'd have to post it for 30 days and to allow for comments and go that way. But we could also do that simply, as I said, as a procedural matter in-house.
I'd like to keep talking about this and maybe see if we can improve the process.
Right. Yeah. And I thought that we would do that. I thought I'd take a look at it and I would check with a number of other agencies. Susan Warren, I spoke with her earlier, and she's going to get me the names of the agencies that she recalls where they had lawyers actually signing the signature page rather than the cover sheet. So that I'd like to speak with those agencies and take a look at their process. And I don't think she knew of any that had an automated system, but some of them, she advised me, are thinking of going to an automated system. And I'd like to know what they've got in mind, just to see, so I can give you all a report back.
Great. Thank you very much. And
sure.
If you would communicate with me about it, I'm interested in it.
Be happy to.
Thank you.
And John, I thought you were clear earlier that we need to keep looking at that one. I
thought that's what I.
Oh yes, absolutely.
We're
clear. I think we need to keep working on it a little bit. Thank you. Have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And a second. Thank you very much. All those in favor say aye. Motion passes. We are adjourned.